Chapter 273. Zhou Xuanji, hand over the Tianxia map. You will not be able to escape. The purple-robed man shouted loudly. His name was Zhu Hanlong, and his cultivation base was at Mahayana Stage 7. He was ranked 39th in the Northern Wilderness Top 100, and his name shook the entire region. The cultivators behind him were all excited. Tianxia map. Hearing these 3 words, they were moved. Humph. You're courting death. Lin Chang's cold snort was heard. Then, a beam of sword aura that was 1,000 feet long broke through the sea of clouds and charged toward them. The purple-robed man raised his palm and slapped it down. A huge tiger head appeared out of thin air and shattered the sword chi. As soon as he retracted his palm, the tiger head turned into smoke and dissipated. Lin Chang'e flew over, and Ning Zifeng followed him. The 2 of them frowned slightly when they saw so many cultivators. Skyfall was in the territory of the demons. If Jihuang Demon Lord knew how so many experts had rushed over, he would definitely take action. Could it be that they had already colluded with Jihuang Demon Lord? The 2 of them were not afraid. Instead, they were eager to try. Let's compete and see who can kill more. Ning Zifeng raised his brows and asked provocatively. Lin Chang'e snorted and said, let's compete then. Without another word, the 2 of them raised their swords and charged forward. A great battle immediately broke out. At the top of the mountain, Zhou Xuanji was still cultivating. Daoya old man walked up to him and said, be careful. With a sweep of his divine consciousness, he could clearly see the lineup below. In the entire human race, there wasn't a single sacred ground that had so many spirit refinement cultivators. In other words, these people came from various forces and joined forces to seize the Tianxia map. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes and frowned. What will come will come. However, he was not afraid. Besides Lin Chang'e and Ning Zifeng, there was also Fenyu Dragon King, which was enough to defend against the next wave of attacks. He stood up, looked at Xian Xianghua, and asked, hey, how are your injuries? This old demonic woman was a great tribulation scattered immortal. Even if he was injured, he was not someone a Mahayana cultivator could threaten. It's all right. It's not a problem to deal with these minions. Xian Xianghua replied without opening her eyes. She was as domineering as ever. As expected of the dragon's proud flower. Can you find the mastermind? Zhou Xuanji asked Daoya old man. After he killed the 5th and 8th in the world, those who dared to make trouble for him would definitely be even more powerful. He first thought of Jihuang Demon Lord. Daoya old man closed his eyes and pinched his fingers together to calculate. After a while, he opened his eyes and frowned. There is demonic aura. Other than Jihuang Demon Lord, there shouldn't be any other demon that dares to target you. Zhou Xuanji rubbed his chin and began thinking. Why didn't Jihuang Demon Lord do it himself? Could it be that he wanted to test his strength? No matter what, a bitter battle was coming. He immediately sent a telepathic message to Xiao Jinghong, who was at the foot of the mountain, and asked him to gather all the disciples in case they were ambushed. Boom! 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 Under the sea of clouds came the sound of explosions one after another, and one could faintly hear the battle cries of cultivators. Zhou Xuanji observed the battle with his mind. Lin Chang'e and Ning Zifeng were surrounded by 3 great realization cultivators and were at a disadvantage. But from the looks of it, they could still hold on for a while. It was a good opportunity for them to temper themselves. When they could no longer hold on, Fenyu Dragon King would take action. Meanwhile, 10,000 miles away, Jihuang Demon Lord stood on the peak of a mountain and looked into the distance. From here, he could vaguely see Skyfall's silhouette. Behind him, an old demon wearing a Taoist robe stood in human form. He had a head of white hair and a kind face. If not for the bull tail on his back, others might mistake him for an immortal. Sovereign, what are you afraid of? The old demon in the Taoist robe asked. As the second in the world, was there a need to be afraid of the fifth? This was not Jihuang Demon Lord's style. Humph, why would I be afraid? I only want to lure him out before suppressing him. Jihuang Demon Lord snorted coldly. Although Zhou Xuanji killed Huangquan Drake King, it was not a threat to him. He was confident that he could kill Huangquan Drake King after all. But he was indeed a little afraid. With the Tianxia map and Xian Xianghua, who would dare to charge forward? He was not a nether ghost who had multiple lives. It was strange that a nether ghost with multiple lives died immediately. There must be something wrong. Fate Ox, how is Daoya Old Man's divination compared to yours? Jihuang Demon Lord asked suddenly. Almost every major faction had someone who was proficient in divination and divination. Only by doing so could they avoid disasters and develop in the long run. Of course not as good as me. The old demon in the Taoist robe, who was called Fate Ox, replied arrogantly. Among the demons, his divination technique was the most powerful. He had contributed a lot to Jihuang Demon Lord's progress. Or else, with Jihuang Demon Lord's personality, how could he have grown to where he was today? Without him, he would have died long ago. This was also why Jihuang Demon Lord valued him so much. I have heard that although a Qilin appeared when Zhou Xuanji was born, his lifespan was short. If not for Daoya Old Man changing his fate, he would have died long ago. Now, no one can divine Zhou Xuanji's fate. Tell me, what fate did Daoya Old Man change for him? Jihuang Demon Lord looked straight ahead and asked slowly. The Tianxia map and the Celestial Devil Rebirth technique were at Skyfall. He could not wait to crush Skyfall with a punch. Fate Ox was stunned and fell into deep thought with a frown. He could not answer this question. He knew how to change fate too, but he could not change Zhou Xuanji's fate. Jihuang Demon Lord did not speak anymore, and the two demons fell into silence. Sometime later, a domineering dragon roar came from Skyfall. Fenyu Dragon King had joined the battle. His participation changed the situation straight away. Damn! Why isn't Jihuang Demon Lord attacking? The purple-robed man cursed with gritted teeth. Blood was flowing from his face, and he looked a little pathetic. The other two great realization cultivators were also in a miserable state. They were severely injured. Lin Chang'e and Ning Zifeng were panting as they stared at him fiercely. The domineering Fenyu Dragon King stood between them. Scorching lava flowed all over his body, which frightened the cultivators so much that they backed off. If you continue to be stubborn, I will eat you. Fenyu Dragon King roared furiously. His voice swept up a powerful gale, which shook the forest below like a tsunami in a green ocean. The cultivators were furious too, but they did not dare to go against Fenyu Dragon King's aura. Humph, I want to see if you can eat them. At this moment, Jihuang Demon Lord's cold laughter came. His voice shook the heavens and earth, and it was even more domineering than Fenyu Dragon King's. He came walking in the air with Fate Ox behind him. Seeing him coming, Fenyu Dragon King's expression changed drastically. Lin Chang'e and Ning Zifeng's eyelids twitched violently too. Second in the world. Great tribulation scattered immortal. Jihuang Demon Lord looked up at Skyfall. Zhou Xuanji, the Tianxia map is not something you can have. If you hand over the Tianxia map, I can consider sparing your life, he said with a mocking smile. After that, he pressed down with his right hand. Before Fenyu Dragon King could react, he felt a formless giant mountain smashing into his body. He fell into the forest, sweeping up a cloud of dust, and the ground shook violently. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 274. Dragon King. Impossible. Ning Zifeng and Lin Chang'e exclaimed. Fenyu Dragon King was a 9th stage demon. He was defeated by Jihuang Demon Lord in an instant. Isn't this too exaggerated? The human cultivators were also shocked. The strength of the demon clan's sovereign was beyond their expectations. This kind of strength made people uneasy. If Jihuang Demon Lord obtained the Tianxia map, would he let them go? Their eyes flickered and their hearts began to sway. Zhou Xuanji, if you still don't come out, your 2 sword slaves will die. Jihuang Demon Lord mocked. Right after he spoke, Zhou Xuanji flew over through the clouds and stopped in front of Lin Changge and Ning Zifeng. He was dressed in white, and he held the ancient god's sword and the sky-extinguishing sword in his hands. His expression was calm, and he did not seem nervous at all. If you want the Tianxia map, why go through so much trouble? You can just look for me. Could it be that you want to share the Tianxia map with them and comprehend the Great Tao together? Zhou Xuanji asked with a faint smile. In his heart, he was thinking about how to deal with Jihuang Demon Lord. It was already so difficult to defeat Huangquan Drake King, let alone Jihuang Demon Lord. Emperor Hanlin had yet to awaken, and the ancient god's sword needed 3 years to summon the soul of a powerhouse. The only thing he could rely on was the Hades god-slaying formation. Share the Tianxia map. The cultivators' hearts raced as they subconsciously looked at Jihuang Demon Lord. There were too many legends about the Tianxia map. It was said that the Tianxia map contained a peerless technique. It was said that the Tianxia map contained a huge amount of wealth. It was said that the Tianxia map contained an elixir that could instantly turn one into a sage. They had gone through so much trouble to get here, not just to help Jihuang Demon Lord. Why should I share what I want with others? Jihuang Demon Lord mocked. He could tell that Zhou Xuanji was trying to sow discord, but he did not care. He waved his left hand through the air, and a massive black claw appeared out of thin air, sending thousands of cultivators flying with blood gushing from their mouths. Only 3 Grand Ascension cultivators managed to evade the attack. Jihuang Demon Lord. What are you doing? Are you trying to break the contract? The purple-robed man bellowed furiously. The massive black claw had killed several hundred leaving Aperture Realm cultivators in an instant. How could he not feel a pang in his heart? Of course, it was mostly fear. Jihuang Demon Lord said in disdain, a bunch of ants dare to negotiate with me? Have you forgotten that this is a time of war between the 2 races? No one will say anything even if I kill you traitors of the human race. The purple-robed man's expression changed, and he immediately turned to flee. Xiao! A black spear formed by demonic chi pierced through his chest, stopping him in his tracks. Then, he turned into a dried corpse at a speed visible to the naked eye. His soul screamed as it was absorbed by the black spear. Lin Changge and Ning Zifeng broke out in cold sweat. Zhou Xuanji was expressionless, but he was sweating in his heart. This guy was even crueler than Huangquan Drake King. The other 2 Grand Ascension cultivators did not manage to escape either and perished one after the other. Jihuang Demon Lord did not stop but strolled toward Zhou Xuanji. Seeing this, he immediately took out all the divine swords. All of you retreat to the mountain. Zhou Xuanji stared at Jihuang Demon Lord and said coldly. Lin Changge and Zhang Xian didn't try to be brave and left quickly. That's more like it. There's no need for others to disturb the matters between me and you. Jihuang Demon Lord laughed maniacally, his expression somewhat deranged. It was as though he could already see the scene of him obtaining the Tianxia map. Jihuang Demon Lord, you ignored the war between the 2 races and came to snatch the Tianxia map. Do you really think you can defeat Yang Di with the Tianxia map? I'm afraid that before you become powerful, Yang Di will have already conquered the northern wilderness region and exterminated the demon race. By then, you will have no place to stay. Zhou Xuanji mocked. The World Fool sword was above his head, and Jihuang Demon Lord was already within 1,000 meters of him. Jihuang Demon Lord stopped and said with a deep voice with a frown, You think I'm you? I don't know how to use the Tianxia map after obtaining it. Hearing Zhou Xuanji mention Yang Di, he was infuriated. Are you sure? You have never used the Tianxia map. Even if I give it to you, it will take time for you to make the Tianxia map recognize you as its owner again. Why don't we work together and kill Yang Di first, then I will give you the Tianxia map. By then, you will be the top cultivator, and I will be the second. Isn't it a win-win situation? Zhou Xuanji stopped smiling and looked serious. He prayed in his heart. Wisdom subduing legendary sword, please show me your power. Jihuang Demon Lord heard him and fell into deep thought, frowning even more. What he wanted the most was not the Tianxia map but the top cultivator in the world. Zhou Xuanji's words moved him. Sovereign, what are you thinking about? Fate Bull cried out. He kept his distance from Jihuang Demon Lord and Zhou Xuanji within 1,000 meters, so he was not affected by the World Fool sword. He felt that it was strange. If it was the usual Jihuang Demon Lord, he would have attacked straight away. Why would he talk so much nonsense? He's thinking about the top cultivator in the world. Do you understand? When your master is thinking, who gave you the right to interrupt? Zhou Xuanji glanced at Fate Bull and shouted furiously. Fate Bull was so furious that he snorted and said with a deep voice, "Noisy brat, you will die today." Don't try to deceive, he stopped before he could finish his sentence. Because Jihuang Demon Lord was staring at him with the corner of his eyes. He was covered in cold sweat immediately. He knew that he had crossed the line. Jihuang Demon Lord looked at Zhou Xuanji again and said with a murderous aura, "Brat, today, you have to hand over the Tianxia map even if you don't want to." After that, he raised his right hand, and a long black spear appeared in his hand. The tip of the spear was like the head of a dragon, hideous and horrifying. Strands of black demonic qi wrapped around the spear. Zhou Xuanji sighed in his heart. The effect of lowering one's intellect was not higher than his desire for the Tianxia map. Stop! A violent cry came. Before he could finish, a beam of light came from the horizon and landed in front of Zhou Xuanji. As the light faded, a domineering figure appeared. It was Jiang Wudi. The third in the world. The second in the human race. He stared at Jihuang Demon Lord with a dignified face and said, "Demon Lord, Zhou Xuanji is the husband of my descendant. How can I let you attack him?" Zhou Xuanji was astonished. This old brat was trying so hard to rope him in. Jiang Wudi. I know who you are. Very well. Today, I will kill you here and eliminate a great threat for the demon race. Jihuang Demon Lord said coldly. He was furious when he saw Jiang Wudi. Jiang Wudi heard him and laughed condescendingly, "Let's see who kills who." Boom! He charged straight at Jihuang Demon Lord. The two powerful cultivators turned into two beams of light and clashed violently. They flew into the sky and dove into the ground. They were so fast that Zhou Xuanji could not keep up with them. On the peak of Skyfall, Xian Xianghua looked confused and mumbled, "Why is this brat so hot-tempered? It doesn't seem like him." In her understanding, although Jiang Wudi was powerful, he was a coward. He would hide from Jihuang Demon Lord if he could. Xuanji and Jiang Shui love each other after all. The Tianxia map is in Zhou Xuanji's hands, and he can benefit from it. Daoya old man analyzed, but he felt that his guess was a little far-fetched. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 275. Boom. Boom. Boom! Jihuang Demon Lord and Jiang Wudi fought fiercely. Each of their spells was ever-changing, and it was hard to tell who had the upper hand. Jiang Wudi's spells leaned towards physical cultivation. Every punch and kick had the power to destroy the world. Jihuang Demon Lord was shrouded in demonic qi. The black spear in his hand pierced out continuously. Numerous demons appeared and surrounded Jiang Wudi like an army. When they were far away from Zhou Xuanji, they regained their senses. What's going on? I'm here to force him to retreat. Why did I fight with him? Jiang Wudi regretted in his heart. Why did I get carried away all of a sudden? He came to cheer for Jihuang Demon Lord. With him, Xian Xianghua, and Zhou Xuanji, he thought that Jihuang Demon Lord would retreat. But he did not expect him to fight with Jihuang Demon Lord the moment they met. Now that things had come to this, he could not care less about regret. He could only fight with all his might. Jihuang Demon Lord also sensed that something was wrong. His target was Zhou Xuanji. How could he fight with Jiang Wudi? Where did Jiang Wudi get the courage to fight with him? It must be because of the Tianxia map that made him lose his mind and go crazy. At the thought of this, Jihuang Demon Lord's eyes turned ferocious. He decided to kill Jiang Wudi with all his might. The battle between the human and demon became even more violent. Mountains were crushed one after another, and the sea of clouds billowed like a flood dragon. A horrifying pressure swept across the heavens and the earth, causing countless demons to flee in fear. Zhou Xuanji looked into the distance. From his perspective, he could see continuous explosions at the horizon. Dust covered the sky, and two silhouettes collided like auroras. The scene was terrifying. It was like a battle between immortals that could destroy the world. He sighed in amazement. Was this the power of a great tribulation scattered immortal? He wondered if he could unleash such destructive power when he broke through to the great realization stage. It was so tempting. Brat, the sovereign did not have time to deal with you. Let me deal with you. Fate Bull Demon's voice came from behind him. Before he could finish, Zhou Xuanji had already teleported away with the 8-step sword lunge. After countless battles, he had a keen sense for sneak attacks. Heavenly lightning surrounded his body, and his skin turned golden. He stared at Fate Bull Demon and laughed coldly. You are only at the great realization stage. You want to kill me? Seeing his expression, Fate Bull Demon's heart jolted. He did not panic. He quickly created many clones that filled the sky, dazzling everyone's eyes. Zhou Xuanji, you should not exist in this world, and the Tianxia map should not belong to you. Take out the Tianxia map now. Thousands of doppelgangers threatened in unison. Their voices converged together, causing one to be in a trance. Zhou Xuanji said expressionlessly, shouldn't exist in this world. Xiao. Xiao. Swoosh, all the divine swords attacked one after another, bringing with them dragon-shaped sword chi that wreaked havoc in the sky. The clones were pierced through by the divine swords one after another, and it was difficult to tell which one was the true body. Zhou Xuanji was prepared to do it himself. At this moment, he suddenly felt a formless energy wrap around his limbs. Wisps of black chi appeared out of thin air and wrapped around his hands and feet, rendering him immobile. This guy, what kind of spell is this? He widened his eyes in shock. He felt that he couldn't activate his spirit energy, as if it was sealed. At this time, Fate Ox appeared behind him again. Zhou Xuanji, you are too young and have little experience. I hope you can remember this lesson in your next life. Fate Bull laughed coldly and reached for the back of Zhou Xuanji's neck. Smack! A jade-like hand swung across his face, directly smashing his head into smithereens. It was Xian Xianghua. She pulled back her right hand, and Fate Bull's soul fell into her hand. Instant kill. The black chi that wrapped around Zhou Xuanji's limbs disappeared. Xian. Aren't you severely injured? Fate Bull cried out in fear. Could this old demonic woman be faking it? At the thought of this, his soul shuddered uncontrollably. He roared in his heart, Sovereign. Run quickly. Not even Jihuang Demon Lord could resist Xian Xianghua and Jiang Wudi at their peak. Xian Xianghua's eyes were cold. She clenched her right hand and crushed Fate Bull's soul. Zhou Xuanji's spirit energy recovered. He turned around and said to Xian Xianghua, Thank you. He almost fell into Fate Bull's trap. What kind of spell is that? He did not catch it at all. Be careful in the future. He's using a divine ability that imperceptibly seals the enemy's spiritual energy. I'm not sure what kind of divine ability it is, but I've seen similar divine abilities before. In the face of absolute strength, it's nothing. Xian Xianghua replied calmly, which made Zhou Xuanji sigh. Such a show-off. The two looked into the distance. Jihuang Demon Lord and Jiang Wudi were still fighting intensely. They were so fast that Zhou Xuanji could not tell who had the upper hand. Have you recovered from your injuries? Zhou Xuanji asked. He had a feeling that Jiang Wudi would lose. Because Jihuang Demon Lord's demonic qi was just too powerful. It surged endlessly and enveloped the heavens and the earth. No. Xian Xianghua replied straightforwardly. If she had recovered, why would she stay here to watch the show? Zhou Xuanji shook his head with a smile. On the other side, Jihuang Demon Lord noticed Fate Bull's death too, and waves of shock surged in his heart. Xian Xianghua has recovered from her injuries? If so, the situation would be extremely disadvantageous to him if the battle continued. He immediately turned around and fled, no longer fighting. Jiang Wudi was no match for Jihuang Demon Lord, so he naturally would not pursue him. He heaved a sigh of relief and thought to himself, I must not be so reckless in the future. After the thought, he turned around and flew toward Skyfall. At the peak of Skyfall, in the stone pavilion, Zhou Xuanji and Jiang Wudi sat facing each other. Xian Xianghua and Daoya Old Man sat on either side, while Jiang Shui sat on the wooden railing behind Zhou Xuanji, avoiding Jiang Wudi's gaze. Thank you for your help, sir. Daoya Old Man raised his wine cup and smiled. Jiang Wudi also raised his wine cup and shook his head with a smile. You're too kind. We are a family. A family? You're really shameless. Zhou Xuanji rolled his eyes. But if not for Jiang Wudi's help, it would have been very troublesome. He understood Jiang Wudi's intention, which was to rope him in. I have no interest in the Tianxia map. My cultivation has reached its limit after all, and I can't go any further. But you are different. With the Tianxia map, you can create a new era. I came to help you because I hope to leave the Jiang clan a way out. Jiang Wudi looked at Zhou Xuanji and said solemnly. On the path of cultivation, one could not continuously grow more powerful just by cultivating. Everyone had their own limit. Most people could not even reach inner pellet. It was not because they did not work hard, but because that was their fate. Jiang Wudi was the same as Daoya Old Man. He had already reached his limit and could no longer grow more powerful. Zhou Xuanji nodded and said, no matter what, you helped me today. If the Jiang clan is in danger in the future, I will help. Jiang Wudi heard him and smiled in pleasant surprise. Xian Xianghua snorted coldly and said, don't be fooled by him. He searched for the sea-freezing stone personally because he wants to go overseas to find new serendipity. This means that his ambition is not dead yet. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 276. Of course I will look for opportunities, but I won't set my eyes on the Tianxia map. I don't deserve such a treasure. Even if I get it, it will bring trouble to the Jiang clan. Jiang Wudi explained as cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Xian Xianghua's impression of him was simply too poor, and this was not a good thing. Zhou Xuanji ignored Xian Xianghua and asked, can you tell me what serendipity you are looking for overseas? There's someone from overseas in Skyfall. If you can convince me, we can work together in the future. Jiang Wudi's eyes widened when he heard that. People from overseas? He anxiously asked, where is he? Xian Xianghua glanced at him, and he was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly retracted his attitude. Jiang Wudi immediately told him the reason. To tell you the truth, I accidentally entered a cave and found the words left behind by a great tribulation scattered celestial. He came from overseas, and his name was Dao Hongchen. He claimed that there were countless dynasties, and even the Great Fate dynasty above the ocean. This person obtained a heaven and earth stone by chance. Legend has it that the heaven and earth stone contains the power of heaven and earth. After this was exposed, he was chased by countless enemies. In the end, he hid the heaven and earth stone on a small island overseas and came to the northern wilderness region himself. However, he attracted a powerful enemy. The demonic emperor bloodline. Jiang Wudi's expression turned solemn as he spoke. Demonic Emperor bloodline? What the hell was that? Zhou Xuanji looked confused. Xian Xianghua frowned, and said, the bloodline of the demonic emperor. Legend has it that this race only has a single descendant, and a demonic emperor will appear in every generation. Once awakened, they will possess invincible power. They are bloodthirsty by nature, and even they cannot control themselves. Up until now, the descendant of the demonic emperor bloodline hasn't appeared in 15,000 years. The last descendant of the demonic emperor bloodline fought against the evil king and the hegemon sword emperor alone. At that time, 20 great tribulations scattered immortals gathered together before they managed to kill him. In that battle, aside from the evil king and the hegemon sword emperor, everyone else died. Since then, the northern wilderness region's fate has declined. Until today, the number of great tribulations scattered immortals is far less than before. Zhou Xuanji fell into deep thought. No wonder people often said that this era was not as good as 10,000 years ago. After the hegemon sword emperor, there had never been a true great emperor. He wasn't sure what a great emperor was. A true great emperor wasn't as simple as claiming to be. It was said that he needed the approval of the heavens and earth, and that he needed to be imbued with fate energy. Wait, what does this have to do with the demonic emperor bloodline? Jiang Shui couldn't help but interrupt. For some reason, she didn't have a good impression of this great ancestor. Because of Zhou Xuanji, Jiang Wudi's attitude towards her was completely different, so she had to be on guard. Jiang Wudi glanced at her and shook his head with a smile. Xiao Shui, don't be anxious. I'm not done yet. Little Snow? Everyone's expression was strange, and they felt a chill run down their spines. Could this old fellow not be so attentive? The fortuitous opportunity overseas is that world stone, but Dao Hongchen's last words predicted that the successor of the demonic emperor bloodline would think of a way to obtain that world stone. In other words, if we want to obtain the world stone, we might have to face the successor of the demonic emperor bloodline. Jiang Wudi sighed with an ugly expression. He gritted his teeth and said, the descendants of the demonic emperor bloodline are like the 10,000-year princes. Once they are born, they will be invincible, or even more exaggerated. He looked at Zhou Xuanji and Xian Xianghua expectantly. It would be best if he had the help of these two people. As for who would obtain the world stone, he already had a plan. If you are willing to help me, once we obtain the world stone, we can take turns to comprehend it. I will provide the map, manpower, and resources. I don't ask for much, I just want to break through heaven's secrets and ascend as soon as possible, Jiang Wudi said seriously. Ascension was something he yearned for day and night, and it was almost becoming a demon in his heart. Apart from becoming an emperor of an empire and ascending every 1,000 years, it was very difficult for ordinary people to ascend. It was not that he did not want to become an emperor, but he gave up on it. An emperor of an empire was mighty in the mortal realm, but if he ascended, he would be subdued by the immortals of the upper realm. He would never have freedom, and it would be difficult for him to improve his cultivation. No one knew the reason behind this, but this legend had long spread throughout the northern wilderness region. Almost everyone who stepped into the cultivation world knew about it. Jiang Wudi was proud. He would rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. Zhou Xuanji shook his head and said, let's talk about it in the future. Skyfall has not stabilized yet. Jiang Wudi nodded and smiled, of course, we have to think about this at length. He still had his lifespan, so there was indeed no hurry. Xian Xianghua said disdainfully, the sea freezing stone is in my hands. Of course, you are not in a hurry. Jiang Wudi heard her, and his mouth twitched. After that, they chatted for a while more before Jiang Wudi left. According to him, Jihuang Demon Lord could not keep an eye on Zhou Xuanji for a long time. After all, the two races were at war. Daoya Old Man reminded Zhou Xuanji, the descendant of the demonic emperor bloodline is like a world-destroying demon. He is born to be bloodthirsty and is even more difficult to deal with than a 10,000-year prince. If you offend him, it will not be a good thing. Zhou Xuanji nodded. He had the Tianxia map, so why would he need the World Stone? 10,000-year prince, Tian, the descendant of the demonic emperor bloodline, just thinking about it gave him a headache. How could there be so many overpowered people? Each of them sounded like the main characters of the world. In the next period of time, Zhou Xuanji asked the 4 mountain guarding kings to gather all the demons within a radius of 10,000 miles so that they could gather information and spread the news. How powerful were the 4 8th-grade demons? In less than 10 days, they had subdued more than 200,000 demons, most of whom were weak, with the momentum of the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. But the weaker they were, the more inconspicuous they would be, and it would be harder for the enemy to discover them. A month later, a shocking piece of news shook the entire northern wilderness region. Jihuang Demon Lord encountered Yang Di. Within 10 rounds, Jihuang Demon Lord suffered a crushing defeat and escaped with severe injuries. Once the news spread, the two races were in an uproar. The humans were exhilarated, while the demons were terrified. The first and second in the world had such a huge difference in power. Everyone understood that the war between the two races was about to turn around. Liuwu Demon Wolf told Zhou Xuanji about the news. He was shocked and could not calm down. Back then, he respected Jihuang Demon Lord. He did not expect Yang Di to defeat Jihuang Demon Lord so easily. Zhou Xuanji heard about it and frowned. He had witnessed Jihuang Demon Lord's prowess. He was like a god and could not be resisted by the current him. Such a powerful cultivator was defeated in less than 10 rounds. With their power, 10 rounds were like the blink of an eye. Which meant that Jihuang Demon Lord was defeated by Yang Di instantly. Seems like Yang Di broke through again. Daoya old man sighed in amazement. Such a person should have appeared 10,000 years ago. In the current age, he was truly the most outstanding individual, and no one could rival him. Xian Xianghua frowned. Her eyes were filled with displeasure. Zhou Xuanji gathered everyone at the top of the mountain, including the second-generation disciples. He told them about Jihuang Demon Lord's defeat, and everyone was dumbfounded. They had witnessed Jihuang Demon Lord's prowess before, but they did not expect such a person to suffer such a crushing defeat. For the next period of time, everyone, focus on cultivating and practicing your sword. Try not to go out. With Yang Di, the demons will surely be defeated. Don't worry too much about your families. Zhou Xuanji said, and the disciples nodded. At this moment, analyze that the sword owner has reached 30 years old. Gotcha started. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 277. 30 years old. Zhou Xuanji sighed in his heart. Time does not keep anyone. In the blink of an eye, I'm already 30 years old. Fortunately, this was the northern wilderness region. He was still young, still a teenager. Ding! Congratulations, the sword owner has obtained bronze, flaming sword. Bronze? I'm already 30 years old. Why didn't you give me a surprise? Zhou Xuanji was a little angry, and the disciples before him were all shocked. Why did the grand teacher's face suddenly turn grim? Gold, flying leaf sword, amethyst, soul sword. In the end, the sword spirit did not give him a surprise. Now, the amethyst legendary sword could no longer bring him excitement. The amethyst legendary sword could not threaten a great tribulation scattered immortal. It was the same for the glorious gold legendary sword. Only a heavenly soul legendary sword or a higher grade legendary sword could make him happy. Especially in such a situation, he longed for an intimidating spirit legendary sword. Heavenly soul, intimidating spirit, celestial shaking, God slaying, Armageddon. He was looking forward to it. Okay, disperse and continue your training. Zhou Xuanji waved his hand and said. Xiao Jingheng, Ning Zifeng, and the others immediately left with the second-generation disciples. He took a deep breath. He could not place his hopes on the legendary swords. His own power was more important. It was better to focus on cultivating the world Buddha art. The information of the 3 legendary swords appeared before his eyes: sword name, flaming sword grade, bronze description. In ancient times, a cultivator traveled the world alone. Every time he extinguished his fire, he would use this sword. After extinguishing the fire 10,000 times, the sword transformed into a bronze legendary sword. Sword name, flying leaf sword grade, gold description. This sword has absolute control over leaves. It is extremely destructive and can sense the spirits of all plants. Sword name, soul sword grade, amethyst description. Soul origin is an extremely powerful soul. Once released, this sword will summon an army of soul origin. Not bad. Zhou Xuanji took out the 3 legendary swords and familiarized himself with them before continuing his cultivation. On the other side, the second-generation disciples were walking on the mountain path. Su Yang asked Xiao Jinghong carefully, "Revered teacher, how could the grand teacher be in a bad mood?" Beixiao Wangjian stared at him, which scared him so much that he shrunk his neck. Ning Zifeng chuckled and said, "Sunlight Emperor has come out and is leading the way. Master is naturally unwilling to be left out. He must have comprehended something." When everyone heard this, they felt that it made sense. Everyone thought that Zhou Xuanji would become the top cultivator in the future. Facing the number 1 expert in the world, his mood was naturally different. Cultivate well. It's our chance to rise up when Sunlight Emperor is in control of the human tribe. Don't let our master down. Lin Chang'e said, his tone full of expectation. He was already imagining the scene of Zhou Xuanji fighting Yang Di. It wasn't just him. Everyone in Skyfall felt the same way. The sun set and the moon rose. Late at night, Zhou Xuanji and Jiang Shui sat by the cliff and looked up at the starry sky. "Today, I am already 30 years old. You are almost 34 years old." Zhou Xuanji sighed in amazement. Hearing this, Jiang Shui stretched out her right hand with a smile and pinched his waist. She asked with a faint smile, her eyes filled with murderous intent. "Well, you're almost 18. Zhou Xuanji corrected himself and looked at her with a gentle gaze. Even though she was already 34 years old, this girl was still like a young girl. Although she was intelligent, in his eyes, she was still as pure as snow. The beauty in front of him had accompanied him for 28 years. In both his past and present life, she was the person who had accompanied him the longest. He hoped that 10,000 years later, he would still have her by his side. He would definitely try his best to do so. "Oh yes, I want to marry you. When do you think is a suitable time?" Zhou Xuanji looked ahead and asked softly. Jiang Shui was not surprised. She blushed and said, "I'll do whatever you want." Before, Zhou Xuanji felt that he was not powerful enough, so he did not mention this matter. But during this period of time, he thought about it a lot. Cherish the present. Whether they got married or not, he had a responsibility for Jiang Shui in his heart. "Actually, I want to let the world know that you are my wife on the day I establish my sect. But I feel that it's too far away now, and I'm afraid that you will be sad," Zhou Xuanji said seriously. Zhou Xuanji said seriously. These were his heartfelt words. Jiang Shui hugged his arm and leaned on his shoulder. "Then we'll wait for the day you establish your sect. Now is not a good time. You and I both need to cultivate hard, and I don't want you to be distracted because of me," she said with a smile. "Of course, I also hope that the world knows that we are married. How grand will that be? In the future, the establishment of our sect will be our wedding anniversary. Just thinking about it makes me happy." Zhou Xuanji felt a warmth in his heart. He held her hand and began talking about the details of their marriage. Far away, in front of a building, Xian Xianghua looked at their backs and snorted coldly. A look of displeasure could be seen in her eyes. This brat did not take her seriously at all. After Yang Di defeated Jihuang Demon Lord, the world changed drastically. In that month, He charged into the demon army alone and killed millions of demons to save the imprisoned powerhouses from the sanctums. Because of this, Yang Di's reputation skyrocketed, and his name spread across the world. 3 months later, the demon army that the demons left in the human race were all defeated. In the 4th month, Jihuang Demon Lord retreated, and so did the entire demon army. This even caused the demon race's territory to shrink. In the 6th month, Yang Di descended to the Shanghai Ziggurat and announced to the world that he invited the 8 sanctums, 7 empires, and top-tier factions to gather at Duantian Cliff. It was a year later. Rumors spread all over the world. Many said that Yang Di wanted to dominate the human race alone. Because of his powerful performance, the voices of opposition were far less than those of support. Across the entire human race, Yang Di's reputation was unprecedented. Compared to him, Zhou Xuanji was like comparing a grain of rice to the bright moon. At the top of Skyfall, Zhou Xuanji frowned deeply. Daoya Old Man, Xian Xianghua, Xiao Jinghong, and the others gathered here. The letter that Zhao Zongjian received was an invitation from the Shanghai Ziggurat, inviting the Master of Skyfall to Duantian Cliff. Now, everyone in the world knew that Zhou Xuanji was in Skyfall. He would establish his own sect sooner or later, and he was already a faction. Humph. Yang Di is so ambitious. No, I must go to the surrounding mountains to spread the news and gather the Tanhua sect's disciples. Xian Xianghua snorted coldly and disappeared on the spot. Zhou Xuanji ignored her and fell into deep thought. Should he go to Duantian Cliff? You cannot go personally. Although Yang Di is the top cultivator in the world, no one knows his true nature. What if he wants to kill you? The entire world thinks that as long as you continue to grow, you will become the top cultivator in the world. Moreover, you have the Tianxia map. Daoya Old Man reminded him with a grave expression. He had encountered many things in his life, and even his beloved disciple had died. He had a deep understanding of people's hearts. Lin Chang'e said, "Let me go. I represent Skyfall. Yang Di can't kill me, right? As long as he's not stupid." If Lin Chang'e was killed, Yang Di's reputation would plummet. Moreover, there was another faction behind him, the Hegemon Sword Sect. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 278. That's right. Master can't go there personally. Huang Lianxi nodded. Zhou Xuanji's situation now was even more dangerous than before. Tianxia map. Even if Sunlight Emperor didn't kill him, what about the lords of other forces? After all, this was the territory of the demon race. Zhou Xuanji thought for a while and decided not to be reckless. He nodded and said, "Then I will leave this matter to you, Chang'e." Lin Chang'e was no ordinary person. He was a famous genius in the northern wilderness region. "Little Gu, don't embarrass our Skyfall," said Xiao Gu. Ning Zifeng patted Lin Chang'e's face and instructed him with an irritating expression. Lin Chang'e became angry and scolded, "Don't call me that." The two of them started bickering again. Zhou Xuanji was still thinking about Duantian Cliff. With Sunlight Emperor's strength, he could have just unified the world. Why did he have to gather all the heroes in the world? In the northern wilderness region, the strong ruled. Most importantly, he had chosen the Heaven's End Cliff. Back then, Xian Xianghua was besieged by the heroes of the world at the Heaven's End Cliff. In this 1 year, focus on cultivating the sky-dominating divine sword. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. Zhou Xuanji said to Lin Chang'e. Hearing this, Lin Chang'e was overjoyed. Ever since Zhou Xuanji had taught him the sky-dominating divine sword, he had not personally taught him much. He was proud of his talent, so he naturally didn't have the face to take the initiative to speak. This was not a loss. After giving some instructions, Zhou Xuanji dismissed everyone and continued to cultivate. On the peak of the mountain, dressed in a purple dress, Xian Xianghua stood proudly in the cold wind. The veil on her face was not affected by the wind. She gazed into the distance, as though she was waiting for something. 5 black shadows appeared out of thin air in front of him, floating like smoke and dust. Their figures fluctuated, and their faces could not be seen. "Greetings, Sect Master." 5 different voices sounded at the same time. Xian Xianghua's eyes were cold as she said, "Yang Di wants to take over the world. Tanhua sect can't be depressed anymore. Summon the 36 demon chiefs and save the 1,000 Hands demon from the underworld path. I want to conquer the world." "Yes." The 5 demonic shadows answered in unison and disappeared into thin air. Xian Xianghua looked towards the north and muttered, "I shouldn't have let you go back then." After saying this, she turned and flew back to Skyfall. 4 months later. That night, Zhou Xuanji finally broke through to Spirit Refinement Level 6. He had to rely on various treasures, the Tianxia map, and the rich spiritual qi in Skyfall to break through quickly. Ordinary spirit refinement cultivators would spend thousands of years to break through a small realm. Spending 100 years would be considered very fast. Not only that, Zhou Xuanji's understanding of world reincarnation had reached a critical point. Somehow, he felt that something was missing. Just a little. Once he comprehended it, he would be able to cultivate world reincarnation. The amount of spiritual energy required for world reincarnation was already sufficient. He had even practiced the mental cultivation method countless times. Just one step away. Sometimes, you can only reap the rewards if you let go. Xian Xianghua's voice suddenly entered his ears. He opened his eyes and saw Xian Xianghua standing beside him, looking at the starry sky. He sat cross-legged and had to look up at her. He didn't say anything, instead pondering over the meaning of her words. "When I cultivated the Celestial Devil Rebirth technique, I encountered many cultivation shackles, whether it was in terms of techniques, magical spells, or divine abilities. Often, when you long for a goal too much, you will lose yourself," Xian Xianghua said with deep meaning. She had observed Zhou Xuanji for a long time. This boy always looked like he was in a dilemma. She did not want to care too much. After all, everyone had their own path of cultivation. However, Jiang Shui felt heartache and could not help but find her, hoping that she could help. On Skyfall, Xian Xianghua's cultivation was the highest. Even in the northern wilderness region, she was at the peak of cultivation. Lost, Zhou Xuanji frowned and sank into deep thought again. Xian Xianghua lightly patted his head and harumphed, "Little husband, do you really not understand, or are you pretending not to understand?" Zhou Xuanji felt quite surprised. He suddenly came to a realization. So that's how it is. World reincarnation, everything is reincarnation. From nothing to something, from something to nothing, from not knowing to memorizing, from memorizing to forgetting, Zhou Xuanji mumbled to himself, his eyes becoming brighter. Xian Xianghua was attracted by his words. He did not notice that he had entered a state of enlightenment. World reincarnation could completely reflect the power of an enemy. Apart from this, there were other effects, but he would only understand them after truly cultivating them. At this moment, he finally understood. He had practiced world reincarnation circulation technique countless times, and it had almost become an instinct of his body. At the last step, he should forget to let his body control world reincarnation. Let his soul control world reincarnation. And not his memories. Billowing spirit qi gathered toward him, forming a hurricane. Everyone on the mountain peak looked over. Jiang Shui looked pleasantly surprised, while Daoya old man stroked his long beard and smiled, while the others sighed in amazement. "Master broke through again," Zhao Zongjian said excitedly. Zhao Zongjian said excitedly. Could it be another powerful sword technique? Xian Xianghua looked at Zhou Xuanji with a strange expression. This boy, her heart trembled. Even though she wanted to enlighten Zhou Xuanji, she did not expect him to gain enlightenment so quickly. And he had broken through directly. This kind of talent in comprehension, Zhou Xuanji had completely comprehended world reincarnation, and the spirit energy in his body went through a qualitative change. He could feel a strange energy lingering around him, changing his physical body and spiritual energy. This feeling was very mysterious. He could not explain it clearly. However, he suddenly remembered what Daoya old man had said. There were many things in the world that the naked eye and divine sense could not capture, such as fate and fate. Or the heavenly law. Only these things could explain what he was feeling. The onlooker sees the game more clearly than the player involved. What a world reincarnation! Zhou Xuanji sighed in amazement in his heart. The world Buddha art was a top-notch divine art. How could anyone bear to forget it after learning it? Even if he wanted to, it would be difficult. If not for his innate talent of multitasking, it would be difficult for him to do so in such a short time. Of course, he could also seal his memories with spells, but that would obstruct his physical memories. Spirit chi flowed into his body wildly, and his spirit energy grew tremendously during the transformation process. A purple meteor streaked across the starry sky and disappeared in an instant. There seemed to be a meteor just now, the little black snake said in surprise. But it was a pity that no one paid attention to it because everyone's attention was on Zhou Xuanji. Time ticked by. A full 6 hours passed. Zhou Xuanji broke through to spirit refinement level 7 straightaway. At the same time, he finally learned world reincarnation and cultivated it into a divine ability. A faintly discernible and strange pattern appeared on his forehead. At first glance, it looked like a purple 8 trigrams diagram. Boom! He felt an explosion in his mind, and his senses transformed. His perception of his surroundings became dozens of times stronger. He could even sense other people's spirit energy. The most powerful one was Xian Xianghua. Her spirit energy was like a blazing sun, burning fiercely. Before her, the spirit energy of others was so insignificant. Analyze that the sword owner has learned a divine ability. Gotcha started. Ding! Congratulations, the sword owner obtained, intimidating spirit. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 279. After comprehending the world reincarnation divine ability, Zhou Xuanji took an hour to get used to his new senses. His spirit energy had gone through a great transformation in both quantity and quality. Putting aside world reincarnation, he was like a completely different person compared to before. If he used world reincarnation, he could instantly kill his previous self. He once again regained the confidence to look down on the world. Ever since he saw Jihuang Demon Lord's power and knew that Jihuang Demon Lord was easily defeated by Yang Di, he had always felt pressured. Even if he did not want to admit it, it was indeed there. Would someone as powerful as Yang Di really ignore the Tianxia map? Zhou Xuanji slowly opened his eyes, and a brilliant light flashed in them. Wait, when I comprehended world reincarnation, there seemed to be 2 more legendary swords. He suddenly remembered something. Following this, the information of the 2 legendary swords appeared before his eyes. Sword name, Heavenly Retribution Martial Punishment Grade, Intimidating Spirit Description, a legendary sword born when the world was created. It contains a trace of the might of the heavenly law and is extremely destructive. With the martial punishment, it can greatly increase the strength of the sword owner's body. Evil demons will not be able to get close to it, and it cannot be used by those below the Great Realization stage. Sword name, Spring Water Sword Grade, Silver Description, a sword that has undergone a qualitative change after being soaked in 1,000-year-old spring water. When fighting in water, it is like a fish in water. Intimidating Spirit Legendary Sword. Fudge. Is this real? Zhou Xuanji immediately jumped up from the ground as if he had been injected with chicken blood. He clenched his fists and breathed heavily. He was so excited that his body trembled. Heavenly Retribution Martial Punishment. It contained a trace of the might of the heavenly law. However, the requirement for this sword was the Great Realization stage, which made him feel a little disappointed. This showed how powerful Heavenly Retribution Martial Punishment was. He had already reached spirit refinement level 7 and was very close to the great realization stage. Now that he had cultivated the world Buddha art to level 2, his internalization of Qi would be much faster than before. Breaking through to the great realization stage would not be too far away. Thinking about that, he felt even more joyful. At that moment, the others came up to him. Revered teacher, you broke through? Master, what were you comprehending just then? Xuanji, are you all right? Ha ha ha, as expected from my grand disciple. Amazing. Master, was it a sword technique? Everyone was incredibly excited. Yang Di had appeared out of nowhere and dominated the heavens and earth. Under such circumstances, the stronger Zhou Xuanji was, the happier they would be. Facing their questions, Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, all of you, attack me. He wanted to test the power of world reincarnation. Everyone was stunned and felt a little guilty. Zhou Xuanji was already extremely powerful before he broke through, let alone now. Don't worry, I won't fight back. Zhou Xuanji said with a mysterious smile. After saying this, he activated the world reincarnation divine ability. Sneaky people like the little black snake and Chongming demon monarch might suddenly attack and catch him off guard. As expected, Chongming demon monarch was the first to attack, throwing a punch. He activated all of his body's demonic force, his power reaching its peak. This fist was unstoppable, pressing forward courageously, tyrannical to the extreme. Bang! Before Chongming demon monarch's fist could touch Zhou Xuanji, he could already feel the rebound of his demonic energy. Puff! He spat out a mouthful of blood as his body flew backwards. He leaped over many buildings and fell down the mountain from the other side of Skyfall. The others who were about to make a move were frightened out of their wits. They retreated one after another, not daring to make a move. The little black snake that had already leaped into the air froze in fright. It fell to the ground and curled up into a ball, shivering. So close. The group swallowed their saliva and felt a trace of gratitude toward Chongming demon monarch. Xian Xianghua thought about it and asked curiously, you didn't use any spirit energy. How did you send him flying? A divine ability. A very strange divine ability. As the top evil cultivator, she could tell at a glance. But she could not see how powerful this divine ability was. Zhou Xuanji shrugged and said with a smile, because I am the heavens. Anyone who dares to harm the heavens shall be punished by the heavens. Xian Xianghua rolled her eyes. This brat really knew how to boast. Ning Zifeng, Lin Changge, and Zhao Zongjian came up to him and expressed their desire to learn. Zhou Xuanji cursed at them. This was not a sword technique but his energy technique. There was no way they could learn it. The three heard him and were like deflated balloons. They knew that Zhou Xuanji's energy technique was not simple and required massive amounts of spirit energy. If they learned it, their progress would be slow because they did not have the Tianxia map after all. Zhou Xuanji chatted with them for a while before continuing his cultivation. He wanted to completely control his senses and spirit energy, which could not be achieved in a day. Seeing that Zhou Xuanji had become more powerful, the others were stimulated and worked hard on their cultivation. Halfway up the mountain, Chongming demon monarch, who was covered in blood, lay unsteadily in the forest. Blood was bubbling from his mouth, and his eyes were rolled back. His right leg was still twitching slightly. Why? Why? He said with difficulty. He could not understand what had just happened. But this battle had cast a shadow over his heart. He would not dare to attack Zhou Xuanji again, even if it was requested by Zhou Xuanji. A second-generation disciple ran over. Seeing Chongming demon monarch's miserable state, he cried out immediately, Chongming old bull is going to die. Chongming demon monarch heard him and fainted in anger. In the middle of the northern wilderness region, on a grassy plain, Chief Monk Xuanhe led a group of monks ahead. Their faces were rosy, and they were no longer as miserable as before. Suddenly, someone walked toward them, which made Chief Monk Xuanhe squint his eyes. It was Feng Qiu. Xuanhe, long time no see. It seems like you are fine. Feng Qiu chuckled and came up to Chief Monk Xuanhe in 3 steps. They were less than a meter apart. Chief Monk Xuanhe asked, "Why are you looking for me?" "Tanhua sect has fallen. Could it be that you want me to deal with Yang Di?" Now, Yang Di was the only one who dominated the world. No one could stop him. "Do you really understand Yang Di?" Feng Qiu asked, which made Chief Monk Xuanhe frown. Ever since he achieved great accomplishment in his dharma, Feng Qiu always came to him for help. The most powerful cultivators in the world would be targeted by Feng Qiu. For example, Xian Xianghua and Jihuang Demon Lord were both schemed against by Feng Qiu. After the tribulation with Jihuang Demon Lord, Chief Monk Xuanhe thought through many things. He did not plan to participate in worldly battles anymore. He only wanted to become more powerful. The true tribulation is about to descend. You are the top Buddhist cultivator in the world and should save the world. You cannot run away from your responsibilities, Feng Qiu said seriously. He looked at Zhou Xuanji as if he was looking at his savior. Chief Monk Xuanhe shook his head and said, "You are indeed my teacher, but I cannot help you anymore. What you want is not world peace but the ruler of the world. I helped you deal with Yang Di. Next time, do I have to deal with Jiang Wudi and Zhou Xuanji?" He was quite confused. Since Feng Qiu wanted to fight for the world, why did he not do it himself? Having heard this, Feng Qiu's expression darkened and he said, "This tribulation will engulf the northern wilderness region. Even if you don't do anything, the tribulation will come to you. Take care." With that, he disappeared into thin air. Chief Monk Xuanhe was indifferent. A young monk asked anxiously, "Master, where are we going next?" Chief Monk Xuanhe replied calmly, "The North Shore, to search for the immortal Buddha's legacy." Smiley face. Smiley face. Chapter 280. Over a month later. Zhou Xuanji was completely familiar with world reincarnation and his new senses. He began to focus on increasing his cultivation level, and did not immediately cultivate the 3rd level of the world Buddha art. His goal was the Mahayana realm. The sooner he broke through to the Mahayana realm, the less worried he would have to worry about Jihuang Demon Lord's attack. As for the fight with Sunlight Emperor, he was not sure. Because even Xian Xianghua didn't know how strong Sunlight Emperor was now. Analyzed that the sword owner has reached 31 years old. Gotcha started. Ding. Congratulations, the sword owner has obtained, gold, Spring Wind Sword, Emperor's Way Thousand Hand Sword Buddha. The sword spirit's voice continuously sounded in Zhou Xuanji's mind, causing him to open his eyes. Just a divine sword? Furthermore, it was only a gold-ranked godly sword. Zhou Xuanji was inwardly disappointed. It seemed that he had used his luck on heavenly retribution martial punishment. 3 lines of words appeared before his eyes. Sword name, Spring Breeze Sword Level, Gold, Description, created by the Divine Spirit Stone. This sword can weaken the enemy's negative emotions and make them happy. A sword that could make people happy? What the hell? He subconsciously took out the Spring Breeze sword. The sword was blue in color and looked like a crystal, appearing rather dreamy. Wait, this sword might be useful in negotiations. Just like the World Fool sword, it was a support-type godly sword. After playing with the Spring Breeze sword for a while, Zhou Xuanji stored it in the supreme storage and began to inherit the Emperor's Way Thousand Hand Sword Buddha. This name sounded incredible. It must be an extremely powerful sword technique. A huge wave of memories entered his mind, causing him to slowly close his eyes. Apart from him, only Jiang Shui and Daoya Old Man were on the mountain peak. The others were all cultivating in different parts of Skyfall. The reason was simple. If they internalized qi together, they could not compete with Zhou Xuanji. Recently, Xian Xianghua had been acting mysteriously, as if she was plotting something. Jiang Shui was quite talented in the Tao of divination. She could already perform simple divination and predict some small things that would happen a day later. Daoya old man had exclaimed more than once that Jiang Shui might be able to surpass him in the future. It seemed that aside from the way of the sword, this girl's talent in other daos was quite good. There is a sense of omnipotence. It complemented Zhou Xuanji perfectly. After the time it takes to burn half an incense stick. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes in amazement. Such a domineering sword technique. Its destructive power was even stronger than the ancestral dragon sword. The Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha, upon reaching grand completion, would be able to condense sword chi into a thousand-hand sword Buddha. Each hand would wield a sword, capable of destroying the heavens and earth. There were a total of 1,000 sword moves in this sword art. It was profound and unfathomable. He took out the Spring Breeze sword and started practicing. Once this sword appeared, his mood became joyful. Not only him, but Jiang Shui and Daoya old man also felt the same. This kid comprehended a new sword technique again? Daoya old man stroked his beard and smiled, his eyes filled with anticipation. Jiang Shui smiled. Her hands did not stop as she continued to draw the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. The Tao of divination also required spiritual qi. After all, the things she divined were all in the world, and spiritual qi was the medium. Zhou Xuanji spent nearly 10 minutes practicing the Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha's sword technique once. For the current him, 10 minutes was enough to accomplish many things. The more difficult the Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha was, the more he anticipated it. Night fell. Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Tsongjian, and the others ascended the mountain one after another. When they saw Zhou Xuanji training with his sword, their eyes lit up. This kid has already practiced for a day. It seems like this sword technique is not simple. Daoya old man said intently, which made Zhao Tsongjian, Xiao Jinghong, Ning Zifeng, Beixiao Wangjian, Huang Lianxin, and Lin Chang'e all excited. Could it be a sword technique that could rival the ancestral dragon sword? In their hearts, the ancestral dragon sword was already the most powerful sword technique. It would be very difficult for them to create a more powerful sword technique. Zhou Xuanji ignored them and continued to train with his sword. The next morning, he finally reached small accomplishment in the Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha. At dusk, he reached great accomplishment in the Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha. His sword speed was so fast that even great realization cultivators were dazzled. Late at night, he developed the sword will of the Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha. Once he used this sword technique, his mind would turn into the Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha. He took a deep breath and flew into the air, arriving above the sea of clouds next to Skyfall. He shook his long sword, and a golden Buddha image appeared from his body and expanded rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the golden Buddha image grew to a height of 300 meters. Its palms were placed before its chest, and its facial features were exactly the same as Zhou Xuanji's. The Buddha image shone with a golden radiance that illuminated the night sky. Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, and the others opened their eyes wide. Even Daoya old man was shocked. Buddha? He was astonished. When did Zhou Xuanji come into contact with Buddhism? At this moment, numerous golden arms grew out from the back of the Buddha image. There were 1,000 of them, which dazzled everyone's eyes. What happened next was even more shocking. A giant golden sword materialized in each of the Buddha image's hands. The shape of the sword was exactly the same as the Spring Breeze sword. The Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha had truly appeared. Everyone at the top of Skyfall was stunned, their mouths agape. Even Xian Xianghua, who had just appeared, opened her eyes wide and was speechless for a long time. This brat, Xian Xianghua, was shocked in her heart. It was her first time seeing a sword technique that was related to Buddhism. This brat was much more profound than she had imagined. Master, what sword technique is this? Zhao Tsongjian came back to his senses and asked excitedly. Zhou Xuanji entered the Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha's sword will mode. His entire body sank into the thousand-hand sword Buddha, turning into the thousand-hand sword Buddha. The thousand-hand sword Buddha opened its eyes, which gave off 2 rays of golden light that illuminated the night sky. This is the Emperor's Way thousand-hand sword Buddha, a sword within a Buddha within a sword. Zhou Xuanji said. His voice was loud and clear, and it gave off an immense might, as if he was a god. The thousand-hand sword Buddha's might was very powerful, and it was not any weaker than the ancestor dragon sword. Lin Changa gripped his fists, and his breathing became ragged. He wanted to learn this sword technique. However, he had not even learned the ancestor dragon sword yet, and he was still far from learning the Emperor's Way thousand-hand sword Buddha. Daoya old man pinched his fingers together and tried to divine the origins of this sword technique. Pfft, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His legs gave way and he fell straight to the ground. No one paid any attention to him because they were already used to it. Xian Xianghua looked at Zhou Xuanji and thought to herself, could it be that he used the thousand-hand devil's sword technique as a reference? When the others heard this, they also felt that it made sense. At the mention of this, they could not help but think of Qin Gang. They did not know if this fellow was still alive in the underworld path and if he had suffered a lot. However, this was not important. They quickly forgot about this matter. Zhou Xuanji deactivated the Emperor's Way thousand-hand sword Buddha's sword will mode and landed on the mountain peak. He sat down cross-legged and quietly comprehended. The Emperor's Way thousand-hand sword Buddha was broad and profound. The principles it contained were all helpful to his sword Dao. Although the others were excited and curious, they did not dare to disturb them. The moon set and the sun rose. Just as the sun rose, Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes and took out the ancient god sword. It had been 3 years since he obtained the ancient god sword when he broke through to the spirit refinement realm. Now it was time to awaken the soul of another great being. Chapter 281. Zhou Xuanji came into the forest, away from the others. The reason why he avoided the others was not to avoid arousing suspicion, but to leave a surprise for them. Just the thought of using it when he encountered trouble in the future was enough to make him happy. He walked to a large tree and took out the ancient god sword. The method to awaken the next powerful being's soul was very simple, which was to infuse spirit energy into it and use your mind to summon it. Soon, a black shadow emerged from the blade. Zhou Xuanji understood his background. Saber Monarch Dong Hai. 30,000 years ago, when he ascended and left the northern wilderness region, he accidentally died. His soul wandered in the void and was absorbed by the supreme legendary sword system. He did not know anything else about Saber Sovereign Dong Hai. He could sense that Saber Sovereign Dong Hai was no weaker than Emperor Hanlin. Of course, this was only in terms of the strength of the remnant souls. He immediately infused Saber Monarch Dong Hai's soul energy into his body, causing his aura to skyrocket. It was the same as when he used Emperor Hanlin's soul to possess his body. However, his current cultivation level was far higher than before. He felt that he could already challenge Great Tribulation loose immortals. The weakest Great Tribulation loose immortal. He was still no match for an existence like Jihuang Demon Lord. After a simple test, he put away the ancient god's sword and returned to the top of the mountain. Xian Xianghua glanced at him and did not say anything. Jiang Shui was still learning divination from Daoya old man and did not notice Zhou Xuanji's abnormality. 1 month later. Xian Xianghua left without saying a word. She only returned after 7 days. She claimed that she had gathered the 36 devil chiefs of the Tanhua sect and arranged for them to settle on a mountain that was thousands of meters tall. Zhou Xuanji had no objections to this. Ning Zifeng, on the other hand, was very curious. After asking for Xian Xianghua's opinion, he went to find the 36 devil leaders for a spar and returned empty-handed. The next day, Ning Zifeng and Lin Changa went together, but they were still defeated. The 2 of them were completely intoxicated. Every few days, they would go to the 36 devil leaders. At the top of the mountain. The 36 demon chiefs of the Tanhua sect sat cross-legged and cultivated. There were both males and females, and all of them had powerful cultivations. 8 of them were female cultivators. There were 10 devil generals who had reached the Mahayana stage. It was no wonder that Ning Zifeng and Lin Chang'e were no match for such a lineup. AMO leader opened his eyes and said, "Will those 2 brats come again?" Hearing this, the other 35 devil leaders all opened their eyes. Their expressions were strange. When Ning Zifeng first came to challenge them, they were disdainful. Even with Lin Chang'e's help, they would not be able to defeat their combined forces. But if this continued, how could they cultivate in peace? Zhou Xuanji might be our sect lord in the future. Everyone, please bear with it. An elder said. His name was Qin Zheng, the number 1 devil chief. He and the Thousand Hands devil Qin gang were blood brothers. It had been 3,000 years since the 36 demon leaders had gathered together. Ever since Xian Xianghua was defeated by Yang Di, the 36 chiefs had disappeared and left the Tanhua sect. Everyone thought that most of them were dead. He didn't expect them to still be alive and cultivating wholeheartedly. Qin Zheng's words caused the demon leaders to turn their attention to Zhou Xuanji. I heard that Zhou Xuanji is extremely talented. Even without the Tianxia map, he has the potential to become the top cultivator in the world. No wonder the sect lord is so interested in him. However, if he wants to establish his own sect, how will his sect interact with the Tanhua sect? It should be fusion, right? No, Tanhua sect cannot be absorbed by other forces. Yeah, the name of the Tanhua sect cannot be changed. This is our belief. The demon leaders discussed among themselves. Although they admired Zhou Xuanji, they were afraid that the Tanhua sect would change its name. At this moment, Xian Xianghua suddenly appeared among them, which shocked them so much that they knelt down immediately. "Greetings, sect lord," they said at the same time. Their voices were filled with respect. Xian Xianghua glanced at them and asked, "Have you rescued Qin Gang?" Thousand Hands devil Qin Gang was a sharp blade for the Tanhua sect. Other than his cultivation and power, his ability to gather information was also very important to the Tanhua sect. Qin Zheng replied, "Thank you for your concern, sect lord. I have already arranged for him to gather the Tanhua sect's disciples. If not for Zhou Xuanji killing Huangquan Drake King, how could they have saved Qin Gang so easily?" So, Qin Zheng felt a tinge of gratitude toward Zhou Xuanji. After all, Qin Gang had said many good things about Zhou Xuanji to him. About the Duantian Cliff, do you think the Tanhua sect should go?" Xian Xianghua asked, changing the topic. Yang Di had invited everyone in the world to gather, but the Tanhua sect was in an awkward situation where everyone was their enemy. If they went, there would be a lot of trouble. A female demon leader licked her lips and laughed sinisterly. "This is a good opportunity for the Tanhua sect to recover. Let's not go and focus on developing the Tanhua sect. Moreover, I'm afraid the Duantian Cliff banquet is not that simple." Everyone in the world wanted Yang Di to be the ruler of the human race. With just one order, everyone in the world would submit to him. Why did they need to beat around the bush? The Duantian Cliff banquet might be a trap. The other sanctums, empires, and sects could guess it too. But who would dare to reject Yang Di? Xian Xianghua nodded and said, "Have you completed the mission that I gave you?" Although she was rebellious, she understood the current situation. The Tanhua sect was no longer what it used to be. It was no longer the overlord of the evil path. Qin Zheng replied, "Soon. My disciple will bring him here personally." While the Tanhua sect was discussing the Duantian Cliff banquet, Skyfall was there too. Zhou Xuanji gathered everyone at the top of the mountain, including the second-generation disciples. In the following period of time, no matter what happens, we must not leave Skyfall. We will act after I break through to the great realization stage. Zhou Xuanji placed his hands on his legs and said softly. His words were clearly heard by everyone. The little black snake flicked its forked tongue and asked, "Master, if you break through to the great realization stage, do you have the confidence to fight against Yang Di? The others were also looking forward to it. Zhou Xuanji had always had the ability to fight those with higher cultivation levels. He could kill Huangquan Drake King with spirit refinement cultivation. When he broke through to the great realization stage, he would only have one opponent left. I have never seen Yang Di before, but I have the confidence to defeat Jihuang Demon Lord, Zhou Xuanji said conservatively. The intimidating spirit legendary sword was much more powerful than the heavenly soul legendary sword. Together with world reincarnation and great realization cultivation, he had the confidence to defeat Jihuang Demon Lord. What was worth mentioning was that Jihuang Demon Lord had disappeared without a trace. It was as if he was really scared out of his wits by Yang Di. There was no news of him at all. A disciple asked carefully, "Will Yang Di really become our enemy?" I heard from my elders that Yang Di is very diligent in cultivation and does not care much about worldly conflicts. Chongming Demon Monarch glared at him and cursed. He wants to be the ruler of the world, not the ruler of the human race. Do you understand? Everyone would change. Su Yang changed the topic and asked, "Grand Teacher, Zhang Quanglan said that he has news to report to you. Do you want to see him?" Zhang Quanglan was still a prisoner. Every few months, his spirit energy would be drained dry by Zhou Xuanji. As time went by, his heart began to waver. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 282. Bring him up. Zhou Xuanji nodded. After receiving the order, Su Yang quickly descended the mountain. After that, Zhou Xuanji asked every second-generation disciple to report their cultivation progress. These second-generation disciples were all geniuses and had their own gains. None of them had stage fright and were instead looking forward to the patriarch's praise. Jiang Shui, Daoya Old Man, Huang Lianxin, Xiao Jinghong, Lin Changge, and the others sat behind Zhou Xuanji and watched silently. They were all sitting cross-legged without any sense of distance. Finyu Dragon King and the 4 mountain guarding kings were also sitting nearby. They were conversing softly and were in a good mood. The disciples began to report their results one after another. If there was something that interested Zhou Xuanji, he would have them demonstrated on the spot. Up until now, the lowest cultivation level of the second-generation disciples had reached the enlightening realm. It seemed very low, but they were still young and had a bright future ahead of them. Half an hour later, Su Yang led Zhang Quanglan up the mountain. The two sat to the side and didn't interrupt the reports of the second-generation disciples. The last person to report was naturally Su Yang. This brat was very crafty. He didn't say anything and immediately used the 36 Paths Jade Shao sword set. He was even more impressive than the other disciples. Zhou Xuanji looked at him thoughtfully. He was not attracted by his swordsmanship. Instead, he was thinking about which ancient powerhouse he was the reincarnation of. After he finished, Zhou Xuanji waved his hand, indicating that he could leave. Su Yang's face instantly sank when he saw this. Seeing this, the other disciples covered their mouths and giggled. Zhou Xuanji waved his right hand, and Zhang Quanglan leapt over the disciples' heads and landed in front of him. This kid's cultivation, Zhang Quanglan inwardly felt quite startled. Every time he saw Zhou Xuanji, he seemed to become stronger. It was too scary. He felt that if he continued to fight against Zhou Xuanji, he would never be able to make a comeback. Speak. Zhou Xuanji stared at him and said. At the age of 31, he had experienced countless slaughters. His every movement exuded an indescribable majesty. It was difficult for ordinary disciples to remain calm in front of him. He had already grown into an expert whose name shook the world. The Sword Emperor of this era. I'll tell you a shocking secret, and you'll stop torturing me. I hope you'll give the Haotian sect a chance in the future. Zhang Quanglan knelt in front of Zhou Xuanji and said with gritted teeth. In the past few years, he had thought a lot. He felt that Zhou Xian had the opportunity to change the situation in the northern wilderness region, and it would be difficult for the Haotian sect to become his enemy. As such, he wanted to resolve the conflict between them. It depends on what kind of secret it is. Zhou Xuanji did not immediately agree. Zhang Guanglan glanced at the other disciples, hinting to Zhou Xuanji that the second-generation disciples should leave. However, he was unmoved. Zhang Guanglan sighed and began to reveal this shocking secret. Back then, the Haotian sect and the Tanhua sect dominated the demonic path and even suppressed the righteous path. If not for the Hegemon Sword Emperor becoming a great emperor, they would not have fallen. What I want to say is why the Hegemon Sword Emperor was able to become a great emperor. Why are there no more emperors in the world after him? He gritted his teeth at the mention of the Hegemon Sword Emperor. The Haotian sect and the Tanhua sect were mortal enemies, but the Hegemon Sword Emperor was also their common enemy. So there was only one way to become a great emperor, and that was to find Fate Emperor River. As long as one's cultivation was high enough and could withstand the cleansing of Fate Emperor River, they would be able to become a great emperor and become invincible. If a great emperor ascended to the upper realm, they would be able to dominate a region. After the Hegemon Sword Emperor became a great emperor, he directly sealed Fate Emperor River. Very few people knew about this, and only the Tanhua sect and the Haotian sect had clues about Fate Emperor River. They did not tell anyone about this, but they could not break the seal either. Fate Emperor River? Where is it? Zhou Xuanji asked as he narrowed his eyes. The others all had different expressions. Most of the second-generation disciples felt quite shocked. They had never thought that the legendary Hegemon Sword Emperor would be so vicious and selfish. His actions had destroyed the dreams of countless people in the future. He was simply despicable. In Sun Hill, Zhang Guanglan said as he sighed. Zhang Guanglan sighed. Everyone was moved by these words. Sun Hill. Wasn't that Yang Di's base? The little black snake called out, could it be that Yang Di was so heaven-defying because of Fate Emperor River? I knew it, how could there be such a monstrous person in the world? He instinctively glanced at Zhou Xuanji and did not say anything else. In other words, if we want to find Fate Emperor River, we have to defeat Yang Di? How do we know that Yang Di has not become a great emperor? Zhou Xuanji asked. Yang Di could easily defeat the second in the world. Could it be that he had already become a great emperor? Zhang Guanglan shook his head and said, if he becomes a great emperor, it will definitely be earth-shattering, and everyone will know about it. Sunlight Emperor is temporarily unable to break the seal of the Hegemon Sword Emperor, but if he becomes the ruler of the world, he will definitely absorb the vitality of the world to help himself become stronger. His cultivation method can absorb fate. This is also the reason why he could rise so quickly. His tone was complicated. It was not a good feeling to look up to a descendant. Zhou Xuanji stared at him and said, what's the point of saying so much? We still have to defeat Sunlight Emperor first. Although this information was important, it was not enough for him to let go of Xinhao sect and Haoqi alliance. Zhang Guanglan sighed and said, it's too difficult to defeat Sunlight Emperor. By the time you've achieved great success in your cultivation, he would have already become a great emperor, and the gap between you and him will only grow bigger and bigger. However, if you let me go, I'll resurrect the Haotian sect's demonic ancestor. At that time, we'll have a chance of winning together with you and Xian Xianghua. The Haotian sect's evil ancestor? Everyone was in an uproar. Just from the sound of this name, they knew it wasn't a good person. Conspiracy. Humph, you're dreaming. Chongming Demon Monarch said bluntly, at most, we'll let Sunlight Emperor become a great emperor. After he ascends, we can take Fate Emperor River. He looked at Zhang Guanglan as if he was an idiot, which made Zhang Guanglan tremble in anger. That's right. Stop dreaming. Sunlight Emperor can only be defeated by this sovereign himself. A cold and arrogant voice came, causing everyone to get up in shock. Jihuang Demon Lord. The demon race's sovereign had come. He stood at the edge of the cliff and looked at them with a smile that did not seem like a smile. His gaze was locked onto Zhou Xuanji. Jiang Wudi has already gone to Duantian Cliff. Who else can help you now? Ji Huang Demon Lord asked with a cold smile. His tone was filled with excitement. The Tianxia map was right in front of him. Everyone felt as if they were facing a great enemy and were covered in cold sweat. The horrifying scene of Ji Huang Demon Lord and Jiang Wudi's battle was still vivid in their minds. Zhou Xuanji held his swords with both hands and stepped out. The ancient god's sword in his left hand and the sky-extinguishing sword in his right. He walked to the front of everyone and looked at Ji Huang Demon Lord. You know nothing about power, he said with a disdainful smile. Now, he could sense the spirit energy in any living being's body. Ji Huang Demon Lord's spirit energy was as powerful as the sun. Compared to him, Ning Zifeng and Lin Chang'e, who were at the great realization stage, were like ordinary flames. But to him, Ji Huang Demon Lord was not undefeatable. It seemed that this guy had not recovered from his heavy injuries. His body turned golden, and heavenly lightning surrounded his body, making him look like a god of lightning. He walked toward Ji Huang Demon Lord. His powerful aura gave the people behind him a sense of security. You've become more powerful. No wonder you're so arrogant. But you dare to talk about power in front of this sovereign? What a joke. Ji Huang Demon Lord shook his head and laughed. In his eyes, Zhou Xuanji was a fool. No matter how powerful a spirit refinement cultivator was, he could not resist him. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 283. In that case, let's leave Skyfall and fight to the death. Zhou Xuanji stopped 10 meters away from Ji Huang Demon Lord and chuckled. Numerous divine swords appeared above his head, including the World Fool sword. His tone and expression made it seem as if he did not take Ji Huang Demon Lord seriously. Ji Huang Demon Lord was furious. When he became the world's second, where was Zhou Xuanji? How could he tolerate such provocation? All right. Follow me. Ji Huang Demon Lord turned and flew into the distance, and Zhou Xuanji followed closely behind. The two of them flew down diagonally, like two rays of rainbow light passing through the sea of clouds. On a tall mountain next to Skyfall, Xian Xianghua and the 36 devil leaders raised their heads. What a powerful demonic aura. Could it be the sovereign of the demon race? Qin Zheng said in bewilderment. The other devil leaders were also frightened. Who is the other aura? Zhou Xuanji? So strong. Of course it's him. He's currently ranked 5th in the world. This is troublesome. Can Zhou Xuanji defeat Ji Huang Demon Lord? He has the Tianxia map, how can Ji Huang Demon Lord let him go? Hard to say. The demon leaders discussed among themselves. They all felt that Zhou Xuanji would not be able to defeat Ji Huang Demon Lord. It was not that he was not strong enough, but Ji Huang Demon Lord was too strong. Xian Xianghua frowned, but she did not say anything, nor did she chase after him. The people on Skyfall were also very nervous. Ning Zifeng and Lin Chang'e wanted to give chase, but Daoya Old Man stopped them. Don't go up, lest you become Ji Huang Demon Lord's hostage to threaten Zhou Xuanji. If Zhou Xuanji needed help, he would not leave Skyfall. Jiang Shui began to divine for Zhou Xuanji and Ji Huang Demon Lord, but she could not divine anything. She didn't even have the qualifications to suffer the backlash. 1,000 miles away, Zhou Xuanji and Ji Huang Demon Lord were hundreds of meters above the sea of clouds. Ji Huang Demon Lord's eyes turned blood red, and a blood-black saber appeared in his hand. The saber was filled with a baleful aura, causing gusts of cold wind to sweep over. You've already lost your way. You've yet to recover from your injuries, yet you dare to cause trouble for me. You'll die miserably. Zhou Xuanji laughed coldly with a murderous aura. Ji Huang Demon Lord was infuriated. What kind of existence was he? How could he allow a junior to look down on him? I don't know why, but I really want to kill you today, even more than before. Ji Huang Demon Lord said coldly, the killing intent in his eyes solidifying. After he spoke, streams of demonic energy turned into countless black arrows that appeared before him and shot toward Zhou Xuanji. His imposing manner was like a rainbow, like a black river rushing over, covering the sky and covering the sun. Zhou Xuanji did not say anything and directly unleashed the Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha. The Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha condensed two golden swords in its hands. They were the ancient god's sword and the sky-extinguishing sword. They were 300 meters long. The two swords slashed forward, cutting all the black arrows in half and stirring up the sea of clouds. Domineering. Jihuang Demon Lord frowned. Looking at the Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha on Zhou Xuanji, he asked with a deep voice, "Buddha? Have you studied Buddhism before?" Zhou Xuanji looked condescending, and his body fused into the Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha. Sword intense state. At the same time, the power of the sky-extinguishing sword and the ancient god's sword burst forth, causing the Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha to grow taller. It quickly reached a height of 1,500 meters. It was like a golden mountain, and its radiance was like the sun. Above the sea of clouds, he looked like an unparalleled god. He looked down on the heavens and earth and dispelled the darkness in the world. He was incredibly domineering. The Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha opened its eyes, and two rays of golden light shot out, causing Jihuang Demon Lord to squint. Golden arms stretched out from the Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha's back like a blooming divine flower. Each hand held a golden sword, and the shapes of all the legendary swords could be found inside. Full power. Jihuang Demon Lord's expression changed. He had seen the Thousand-Hand Buddha before, but it was his first time seeing the Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha. The 1,000 massive golden swords were incredibly dazzling under the sunlight, giving off a divine glow. Zhou Xuanji did not say anything and quickly rushed towards Jihuang Demon Lord. The Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha swung its 1,000 swords and wildly slashed at him. Its might was extremely powerful, and it was like Pangu splitting the heavens and earth, like a god of war exterminating demons. Jihuang Demon Lord swung his saber to block. He was not weak at all, and his reaction speed was fast as well. He forcefully received each strike. However, the Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha's attacks were simply too ferocious. They came wave after wave, forcing Jihuang Demon Lord to dodge. At the same time, Daoya Old Man was using a spell to project the battle. Seeing such a powerful Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha, everyone's blood boiled. The Grand Teacher is so powerful. So the Grand Teacher already has the power to fight against the world's second. Heavens, is this human power? He's like a god. Even though we're so far away, their auras make my heart shudder. So domineering. Is this a sword technique? Or a divine ability? Not only the second-generation disciples, but even Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, Lin Changge, and the others were stunned. I want to learn. I want to learn. Zhao Zongjian was so excited that his body trembled. Zhang Quanlan gulped. In his heart, Zhou Xuanji had become unfathomable. It was his first time seeing the Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha. Such a domineering sword technique. He had lived for so long, and it was his first time seeing such a sword technique. It was like a divine ability. But with his eyesight, he could immediately tell that the Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha was formed from sword chi and was incredibly powerful. Such attainment in the way of the sword, even the hegemon sword emperor back then could not compare. Most importantly, Zhou Xuanji was only 30 years old. When he was 1,000 years old, wouldn't he be like Yang Di, dominating the world and invincible? He might even be more powerful than Yang Di. Zhang Quanlan frowned, and his heart beat faster. A thought appeared in the depths of his heart. On another mountain. The 36 demon leaders were dumbfounded. Apart from admiration and shock, they had no other emotions. Xian Xianghua's eyes were also filled with amazement. She did not expect Zhou Xuanji to be so powerful. This brat, under her eyes, Zhou Xuanji's rapid growth was not noticed by her. At this moment, Zhou Xuanji was shrouded in mist in her eyes. Boom! Jihuang Demon Lord suddenly flew up. His body grew to a height of 500 meters. His cloak and long hair danced in the wind, and his two horns pierced the sky. Black scales appeared on his face, and his demon energy turned into a gigantic black shield in his left hand. With the black shield in front of him, he swooped down with an aura that could collapse the heavens. The 1,000-hand sword Buddha raised all of its arms. The 1,000 swords combined into one and pierced toward the sky. Sky-dominating divine sword. The sword's might shook the clouds. A golden sword Qi soared into the sky and clashed with Jihuang Demon Lord's black shield. Boom! A powerful radiance appeared under the black shield. The two powerful forces clashed together, sweeping up a powerful gale and causing the sea of clouds below to billow violently. Looking down from the ground, the sea of clouds was billowing, as though the sky was twisting. The scene was extremely majestic. This brat sword Qi is so powerful, Jihuang Demon Lord was shocked in his heart. He suddenly felt a little regretful. If he had fully recovered, how could Zhou Xuanji be so arrogant? He gritted his teeth and asked, "Brat, what sword technique is this?" He tried his best to push down, but he could not resist the sky-dominating divine sword Qi. The 1,000-hand sword Buddha stared at him furiously. Its eyes were like torches, and its divine might was immense. Buddha within the sword, sword within the Buddha, 1,000-hand sword Buddha. This sword specializes in suppressing demons and slaying evildoers. Jihuang Demon Lord, if you are afraid, call me Grandpa 3 times for mercy, and I might consider giving you a quick death. Yes. Chapter 284. Beg for mercy 3 times, Grandpa? Hearing this, Jihuang Demon Lord's rage surged up. Powerful demonic qi flowed out of his body and turned into 9 black dragons that coiled around him. Each dragon was hundreds of meters long. They roared at Zhou Xuanji, and their might shook the heavens. Zhou Xuanji did not panic at all. He provoked Jihuang Demon Lord on purpose. With the World Fool sword, Jihuang Demon Lord could hardly remain calm. Zhou Xuanji could only find an opening by making him mad. He was not at his peak state after all, and the injuries inflicted by Yang Di had not fully recovered. The 1,000-hand sword Buddha swung its 1,000 swords toward Jihuang Demon Lord. The 1,000 swords moved like afterimages, dazzling the onlookers. The domineering sword Qi gathered together and rose like a golden crescent, but it was blocked by Jihuang Demon Lord's black shield. The 9 black dragons around Jihuang Demon Lord roared and swooped down. They tore apart the golden sword Qi and charged toward Zhou Xuanji. The 1,000-hand sword Buddha did not dodge but swung its swords quickly. Heavenly lights. Thousands of suns, moons, and stars shot out like a meteor shower. It was extremely majestic. Boom! The 2 powerful forces clashed together and shook the entire space. It was like the beginning of the world. A boundless and powerful might ravaged the heavens and earth like the manifestation of the heavenly law, and all living beings shuddered in fear. The battle between the human and the demon could be sensed by all the demons within 10,000 miles. Countless demons looked up at the same time. This guy is the second in the world indeed. Zhou Xuanji cursed in his heart as he controlled the 1,000-hand sword Buddha to attack. Even though Jihuang Demon Lord was injured, he was still powerful. Compared to Huangquan Drake King, he was even more powerful. But he was not the same as before. Swoosh! 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 The legendary swords surrounded by dragon-shaped sword Qi shot out. The sword Qi was dozens of meters long, and to the 1,000-hand sword Buddha and Jihuang Demon Lord, they were like golden arrows. Jihuang Demon Lord slashed with his saber and sent the legendary swords flying away. Next, he spun around and appeared behind the 1,000-hand sword Buddha. He held his saber in a reverse grip and pierced it into the 1,000-hand sword Buddha's back. Brat, I will let you taste the true power of the demon sovereign. Jihuang Demon Lord shouted coldly. With a loud bang, a terrifying demonic aura burst forth from the long saber. It was like a nuclear explosion, directly blasting the thousand-hand sword Buddha into countless sparks. A giant hole appeared in the sea of clouds below, as if the sky had been torn apart. This scene caused the spectators on Skyfall to tremble in fear. Was Zhou Xuanji going to lose? The power of the demon clan supremacy? Do you know the power of the Sword Emperor? Zhou Xuanji's cold laughter came from the powerful light, followed by a world-shaking dragon roar. The five-clawed golden dragon, which was thousands of feet long, was accompanied by countless golden stars. It crashed into Jihuang Demon Lord with an unstoppable force, causing him to fall from the clouds and crash to the ground. The two huge figures smashed into the mountains like meteors. The ground collapsed, the mountains shattered, and the trees were uprooted. Rows of dust soared into the sky. Zhou Xuanji returned to his original form, looking like a golden Buddha surrounded by heavenly lightning. He held the ancient god sword and sky-extinguishing sword in his hands. Jihuang Demon Lord also returned to his normal size, holding a saber in one hand and a shield in the other. Looking at Zhou Xuanji, his eyes were so red that they looked purple. He hated Zhou Xuanji to the core. This brat was actually able to fight evenly with him. To him, this was an extraordinary humiliation. If Zhou Xuanji did not die, how could he have the face to be the second in the world? He raised his long saber high, his expression becoming ferocious. Boom! A black beam of light descended from the sky and landed on the long saber in his hand. Black lightning circled around the beam, and the heavens and earth changed color. The people from Skyfall and the 36 demon chiefs were all frightened. What is this? Such a horrifying aura. Is he going to use his full power? SSS, if this continues, can Zhou Xuanji hold on? This is the power of the second in the world? Great tribulation scattered immortal, so powerful, Jihuang Demon Lord's aura filled the entire heavens and earth. It rose steadily, which made them feel like they were facing the heavenly might. Far away, Dao Seeker stood on the white cloud and looked at the battle. He was shocked in his heart. How did this brat suddenly become so powerful? Could it be that he used the saint energy? No. It should be those swords. Facing the arrogant Jihuang Demon Lord, Zhou Xuanji was fearless. With the support of the sky-extinguishing sword and saber monarch Donghai, he still felt that he could put up a fight. Just in time. I'll show you how powerful world reincarnation is. He smiled, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. This was the moment when Jihuang Demon Lord was at his weakest. Go to hell. Jihuang Demon Lord laughed furiously. He swung his right hand forward, and the black beam turned into a blade and slashed toward Zhou Xuanji. This slash was as though it was going to cut the heavens and earth in half. Zhou Xuanji neither defended nor dodged. He welcomed the slash calmly with a smile on his face. Just when the blade was about to touch his hair, the black beam exploded with a loud boom. A horrifying shockwave swept toward the opposite direction and sent Jihuang Demon Lord flying backward with blood spurting out of his mouth. His body smashed through mountains one after another. The ruins below collapsed again. Soil, rocks, and trees were all turned into ashes. Everything was like the end of the world. Everything was crushed into ashes, and the shockwaves swept out in all directions, creating a gigantic crater on the ground that continued to expand. Zhou Xuanji's body swayed, and blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Jihuang Demon Lord's cultivation was too powerful, and he was still injured. But compared to him, Jihuang Demon Lord was more severely injured. When everything calmed down, a horrifying crater with a diameter of a few hundred miles appeared on the ground. Dust curled up like smoke, and the air was filled with an oppressive aura. The demons at the edge of the crater trembled in fear. All of them looked as though they had seen a ghost. Such destructive power. Could an immortal god have descended into the mortal world? On the other side, Jihuang Demon Lord, who was covered in blood, lay in the collapsed mountain. He tried his best to climb up and stand up with difficulty. The black armor on his body was shattered, and the cloak on his back was burned. Blood covered his body, and one could vaguely see his white bones. He gritted his teeth and looked toward the horizon. Fear could be seen in his eyes. What was that just now? Waves of shock surged in his heart. He could not figure out what Zhou Xuanji had done. He slashed with all his might, but why was his attack reflected back? Could it be the Tianxia map? It must be. He opened his eyes wide. Jealousy, anger, and unwillingness intertwined in his eyes, forming a boundless rage. He swore to get the Tianxia map. Jihuang Demon Lord, who do you think will die now? Zhou Xuanji's voice came from above. He looked up and saw a blazing sun above his head. His body was golden and surrounded by lightning bolts. Dozens of legendary swords levitated and pointed at him. He squinted his eyes and said with gritted teeth, Zhou Xuanji, don't use the Tianxia map if you have the guts. Somehow, whenever he got close to Zhou Xuanji, he became agitated and could not maintain his rationality. You think I'm using the Tianxia map? Zhou Xuanji said with contempt. His expression made Jihuang Demon Lord furious again. Boom! Jihuang Demon Lord soared into the sky. Demonic energy came out from his palm and turned into a sharp claw that clawed at Zhou Xuanji. Before he could touch Zhou Xuanji, he was once again covered in blood from the impact and fell down. Smiley face, smiley face. Chapter 285. The summit of Skyfall was in complete silence. Everyone looked at the mirror of light created by Daoya Old Man, dumbfounded. In the mirror, Zhou Xuanji was high up like a god looking down at the mortal world, while Jihuang Demon Lord was in such a sorry state. He soared into the sky again and fell down again and again. Facing Zhou Xuanji, the world's seconds seemed so weak. They have a sense of unreality. It was like a dream. They knew that Zhou Xuanji had become more powerful, but they did not expect him to be so much more powerful. This brat, Daoya Old Man swallowed his saliva in disbelief. Jiang Shui snorted proudly, the world's second is going to have a new owner. The others also chimed in to express their excitement. On another summit, Xian Xianghua and the 36 demon leaders fell into silence. They felt even more surreal than Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Zongjian, and the others. Especially Xian Xianghua. Although that guy is severely injured, he still has the power of a first tribulation scattered immortal, Xian Xianghua mumbled to herself with a complicated look in her beautiful eyes. She felt a little proud in her heart. Her foresight was so accurate. She had taken a liking to Zhou Xuanji before he grew up. If it were now, that brat would probably look down on her even more. She felt a little angry at the thought of this. Regardless of beauty, power, or influence, she felt that she was the best among all the women in the northern wilderness region. Why did this brat look down on her? The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. She swung her sleeves and sent Qin Zheng flying away. Qin Zheng slammed into a giant rock. He was stunned and looked at Xian Xianghua pitifully. The other demon leaders trembled in fear and kept quiet out of fear. On the other side, Jihuang Demon Lord had already fallen dozens of times. He did not have enough demonic energy. He panted in the ruins. His eyes were still filled with rage as he stared at Zhou Xuanji. His heart was filled with shock and indignation. Why? Why? He was the sovereign of the demon race, and yet he was forced to such a state by a human brat. Tianxia map. At this moment, he was almost possessed. His mind was filled with the Tianxia map. Jihuang Demon Lord, as the sovereign of the demon race, you have lived a glorious life. Don't be disappointed. Dying in my hands will not bring shame to you. In the future, I will surpass Yang Di and complete your unfinished dream. Zhou Xuanji looked down at him and said coldly. Speaking of which, Jihuang Demon Lord was rather pitiful. In the past, he was suppressed by Xian Xianghua. Now, he was suppressed by Sunlight Emperor. He had never become the number one in the world. His desire to be number one in the world was not any weaker than Xian Xianghua's. Zhou Xuanji, you think you've won? Jihuang Demon Lord roared furiously. He hated Zhou Xuanji's confident attitude the most. It made him feel disgusted and humiliated. At this moment, Zhou Xuanji swooped down with the 8-step sword lunge. Puchi. The sky-extinguishing sword pierced into Jihuang Demon Lord's chest. Zhou Xuanji stepped on his shoulder with one foot and on his abdomen with the other, forcing him to lean backward. But he had a backbone and did not fall down. His body remained leaning backward. Zhou Xuanji immediately used world internalization and quickly absorbed Jihuang Demon Lord's demonic energy. He wanted to break through to the Mahayana realm quickly and could use Jihuang Demon Lord's help. An image of mountains and rivers appeared around them, faintly discernible. My demonic power, Jihuang Demon Lord's eyes widened. He wanted to struggle, but he could no longer move. The intense battle just now had already inflicted more injuries on him. With the help of the Tianxia map, he could no longer resist. Zhou Xuanji's eyes were cold and did not speak anymore. Jihuang Demon Lord felt despair in his heart. He looked at the scenery around him and was shocked in his heart. Tianxia map. This is the Tianxia map. He fell into a frenzy. Together with the influence of the World Fool Sword, his rationality began to decline. The crisis of death and the Tianxia map's approach made him collapse instantly. I want to get the Tianxia map. I want to become the top cultivator in the world. I want to be invincible. Jihuang Demon Lord's body trembled as he mumbled to himself. His face was hideous. The scenes of the past flooded into his mind like a tidal wave. He remembered the past. Back then, he was still young and had just transformed. It was a forest. He stood on a hill covered in injuries and looked up at an enchanting silhouette. It was Xian Xianghua. With her back facing him, Xian Xianghua laughed condescendingly. Little demon, you are still far from being the top cultivator in the world. As long as I am in the northern wilderness region, the world belongs to me. She laughed presumptuously before leaping up and flying toward the horizon like a fairy. The young demon lord gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. His face was filled with indignation. The distant memories became clearer, and the hatred in his eyes grew more intense. Boom! Zhou Xuanji broke through to Spirit Refinement Level 8. Jihuang Demon Lord still could not move and was in complete despair. He turned his head with difficulty toward the horizon, toward where Xian Xianghua was. If there's a next life, I must let you see me become the top cultivator in the world, he mumbled to himself as his eyelids drooped. He had thought of many endings, but he had never thought that he would die to such a young cultivator. Indignation, regret, there was also an indescribable sense of relief. Zhou Xuanji felt strange in his heart. Could it be that this guy had feelings for Xian Xianghua? He did not think too much and did not let go. When a person was about to die, they would always reveal their true feelings. Back then, the Empress of Great Zhou was like this, and so was the Diablo. But this was the human world. The cycle of life and death was as such. For himself and the people he cared about, he had to kill Jihuang Demon Lord. Massive amounts of demonic energy flowed into his body and turned into spirit energy, which flowed like a massive river and charged into his bones and tendons. Even after the battle, the demonic energy in Jihuang Demon Lord's body was still massive. Most importantly, Jihuang Demon Lord was still creating demonic energy endlessly, just that it was not as fast as Zhou Xuanji's absorption. A while later, Zhou Xuanji broke through to Spirit Refinement Level 9. Another half an hour passed. He broke through to Spirit Refinement Level 10, and Jihuang Demon Lord died completely. The demon race's sovereign died here. The world was silent, and a cold wind blew across the ruins. Zhou Xuanji drew the sky-extinguishing sword and took off his storage ring. Just when he was about to leave, a voice came into his ears, Zhou Xuanji, come over. I have something to discuss with you. He remembered this voice. Tao Seeker. With a thought, he immediately disappeared from where he stood. On the other side, Skyfall was in an uproar. Everyone was exhilarated. On a mountain that was thousands of meters tall, Xian Xianghua heaved a sigh of relief. Although Zhou Xuanji had the upper hand, Jihuang Demon Lord was a 10,000-year-old demon after all. He might have some tricks up his sleeve to kill Zhou Xuanji by surprise. Fortunately, he didn't. Why did this guy lose his mind the moment he touched Zhou Xuanji? She was confused, but she didn't think too much about it. She stood up and left. The 36 demon leaders were unable to contain their excitement and began to discuss excitedly. In the forest, sunlight shone on the grass through the gaps between the leaves. Zhou Xuanji and Tao Seeker stood face to face. He asked softly, "Speak, what's the matter?" Tao Seeker took a deep breath and cupped his fist. He suddenly half-knelt before Zhou Xuanji. Chapter 286. What are you doing? Zhou Xuanji asked with a frown. He had always been wary of Tao Seeker and even felt that he was more dangerous than Jihuang Demon Lord. Tao Seeker took a deep breath and said, "You've already mastered the second level of the World Buddha technique, right?" With this, Zhou Xuanji narrowed his eyes. How did this guy know about the World Buddha art? Could it be that he had really lived for countless years just to pry into destiny? I've seen 3 owners of the Tianxia map. All of them had only reached the second level, but it was enough to rule the world and be invincible. Tao Seeker continued to speak, and Zhou Xuanji's heart trembled a little. According to historical records, the last owner of the Tianxia map was 20,000 years ago. At that time, even the hegemon sword emperor had to lower his head in front of him. After that powerful cultivator ascended, the Tianxia map disappeared without a trace. That was why the hegemon sword emperor, the evil king, and the Haotian sect's evil ancestor had blossomed. 3. This guy was at least 30,000 years old, maybe even older. Who are you? Zhou Xuanji asked. After living for so long, why did this person not ascend? Was the mortal world that good? Now that he thought about it, it was indeed good. It was just like playing a game. A high-level player would open a smurf account to beat a low-level player. Every time they beat, they would feel good. What's important is that I see hope in you. I see hope that you can master the third level of the World Buddha art. Once you succeed, you will be the master of the heavens and earth, and your fate will be connected to the heavens and earth. At that time, you can even go to the Yellow Springs. I am willing to help you, and I hope that in the future, you can go to the Yellow Springs and do something for me. Tao Seeker said seriously, which made Zhou Xuanji frown again. Yellow Springs? The Netherworld? Without waiting for him to ask, Tao Seeker took out a bronze dagger and said, "If you have any issues in the future, you can contact me through this dagger." Zhou Xuanji took the bronze dagger and played with it as he asked, "Let's talk about it first. If you want me to deal with the leader of the Netherworld, won't I be seeking death?" There were many records of the Yellow Springs in the northern wilderness region. Legend has it that there is a blue sky Yellow Springs in the Netherworld. Once you enter the Yellow Springs, you can be reincarnated. I only need you to save one person. I don't know what this person's identity and situation is in the underworld. After all, 70,000 years have passed. Tao Seeker replied calmly, which made Zhou Xuanji's eyelids twitch. 70,000 years. This person was indeed an old thing that wouldn't die. What can you help me with? Can it fight against Yangdi? Zhou Xuanji asked with a smile. He would agree first, and he would try his best in the future. If he could not do it, there was nothing he could do. Tao Seeker shook his head and said, "I can help you gather information and help you establish your sect, but I can't help you kill. If I were to kill, I would instantly turn into ashes because I once asked the heavens for help and used this ring to exchange for immortality." Zhou Xian was even more curious, and asked how he could plead with the heavens. Indeed, Tao Seeker kept his mouth shut. His eyes were filled with fear, and he occasionally glanced at the sky, causing Zhou Xuanji's hairs to stand on end. Could it be that God really exists? If that was really the case, just thinking about it made his hair stand on end. It was as though he could already feel a pair of eyes staring at him. Deal. Zhou Xuanji agreed. He did not need any help for now and only wanted to break through to the great realization stage as soon as possible. The two of them chatted for a while before dispersing. He had wanted to invite Dao Seeker to Skyfall, but after thinking about it, he decided not to. After all, he did not understand Dao Seeker, so he could not just listen to him. However, judging from Qiu Dao's appearance, he did not want to stay by his side either. At Skyfall, Zhou Xuanji gathered his trusted followers and told them about Dao Seeker. As for the second-generation disciples, they were all practicing their sword techniques at the foot of the mountain. 70,000 years. 3 owners of the Tianxia map. If what he said is true, he might be the person who has lived the longest in the world. Daoya old man said with a frown as he rubbed his chin. Compared to Dao Seeker, he was like a little kid. Xian Xianghua said, "It's better to be careful. This person knows too much, and he might be plotting against you." She had never heard of someone like Dao Seeker before. She suddenly felt that she did not understand this world as thoroughly as she had thought. Only God knew how many powerful cultivators were hiding here. After that, everyone's topic shifted to Jihuang Demon Lord. They were all curious about how Zhou Xuanji could defeat Jihuang Demon Lord. Even if Jihuang Demon Lord was injured, he should not have been defeated by him, right? I already said that I had a breakthrough in my divine energy, so it's not difficult for me to defeat him, Zhou Xuanji said indifferently. Zhou Xuanji said indifferently. After that, he sighed and continued, "This feeling of constantly growing stronger is a little tiring and lonely." Everyone rolled their eyes and were speechless. They did not ask further. Everyone had their own secrets after all. Zhou Xuanji had already taught them a lot, and they should not be ungrateful. Within 2 days, the news that Jihuang Demon Lord was killed by Zhou Xuanji spread across the demon race. The battle that day was so earth-shaking that countless demons witnessed it. The death of the world's second was earth-shattering news. How can it be? The sovereign is dead? Yeah, he was killed by Zhou Xuanji, and he could not fight back at all. Could not fight back at all? *T. The sovereign was very domineering. It must be Zhou Xuanji's evil plan. My God, this guy is really on par with the 9 emperors of the Sword's Way. He could kill the world's second at such a young age. Countless demons cried out in shock after hearing about this. Skyfall quickly became a forbidden ground for the demon race. No demon dared to offend Zhou Xuanji. Of course, many demons wanted to join Zhou Xuanji. The news could not be stopped. It swept across the human race like a hurricane. The 8 sanctums, 7 empires, and countless other factions were in an uproar. Zhou Xuanji was already so powerful. Didn't that mean that the top 5 rankings were all taken by the human race? Great Shang. Yang Xindi listened to Yang Zhongtian's report and was in a daze. All the officials and generals were silent. A long while later, Yang Xindi sighed and said, "We should have tried our best to rope Zhou Xuanji in back then." Diyu and Yang Renlong, who fought against Zhou Xuanji in the World Hero Conference, looked at him with complicated expressions. Now, they could only look up to Zhou Xuanji. Great Zhou. Zhou Qingxin, who was sitting on the emperor's throne, was agitated. Xuanji is already the world's second? He asked with a trembling voice. Killing Jihuang Demon Lord. That was something that even Yang Di could not do. Of course, it was most likely because Yang Di did not want to kill Jihuang Demon Lord. It should be. After all, not everyone can kill the demon race's sovereign. Shitan Changshe said with a smile. He looked calm, but his right hand was trembling in his sleeve. The great Zhou dynasty had produced an incredible person. Since ancient times, Great Zhou had never produced the world's second, not even the top 50. Great Qin. Qin Bantian, who had the royal bloodline of the Yellow Dragon, was petrified after hearing his subordinate's report. A gentle breeze blew into the stone pavilion and messed up his heart. Should I have followed him back then and not returned to Great Qin? He mumbled. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 287. On the 10th day of Jihuang Demon Lord's death, the Shanghai Ziggurat released the top 100 of the Northern Wilderness again. The number 1 in the world, Sunlight Emperor, the Eternal Emperor, dominating both the past and the present. Second in the world, Zhou Xuanji, the current Sword Emperor, the owner of the Tianxia map. Third in the world, Jiang Wudi, has reversed yin and yang and mastered the Qilin Zither. Fourth in the world, Xian Xianghua, Tanhua in the human world, Azura in hell. Zhou Xuanji had officially become the world's second, no one doubted this. That was because he had used Jihuang Demon Lord as a stepping stone to his current position. His reputation had also reached its peak. As time passed, Zhou Xuanji would become a legend in the hearts of the Northern Wilderness region's humans and demons sooner or later, even a myth. The news also spread to the Sun Tomb. Sun Hill was located in the east of the Northern Wilderness region. It was surrounded by mountains and mist. There were many treasures and rare beasts hidden here. Because of Sunlight Emperor's fame, this place was also a pure land. In the bamboo forest, there was a stone pavilion. A man in luxurious golden robes was reading an ancient book while drinking tea. His expression was grave and stern, between his brows was a flame diagram, a strange and divine steed. His entire temperament seemed extraordinary and refined. Together with the immortal mist around the stone pavilion, he was like an immortal hidden in the forest. He was the number 1 expert in the world, Yang Di. Ascension is long, the prison is replaced, he muttered to himself, his brows slightly furrowed as he fell into deep thought. At this time, a boy in a dudu flew over. He rushed into the stone pavilion, knelt down, and said, "Great Emperor, the owner of the second in the world has changed." His face was full of surprise. However, he did not panic. No matter who was the second in the world, the first in the world would not change. Oh. Xian Xianghua? Sunlight Emperor asked in a low voice, his eyes still fixed on the book. No, it's Zhou Xuanji. The boy replied. Sunlight Emperor slowly put down the ancient book in his hand. He relaxed his brows and asked curiously, the 30-year-old heaven's favorite? He had lived for thousands of years and thought that he was the most powerful genius, but compared to Zhou Xuanji, he seemed to be a little lacking. Of course, talent did not mean anything. He had absolute confidence that Zhou Xuanji could not catch up to him. It's him. He killed Jihuang Demon Lord. The boy nodded. He was excited at the mention of this matter. He detested Jihuang Demon Lord. At that time, he didn't understand why Sunlight Emperor spared that guy's life. So be it. I hope that Zhou Xuanji has the guts to go to Duantian Cliff. This emperor wants to see how powerful the number 1 genius is. Sunlight Emperor said with a chuckle. After that, he picked up the ancient book again. From his tone, it was obvious that he did not take Zhou Xuanji seriously. The boy cautiously asked, "Do you need me to kill him?" Even though he had confidence in Yang Di, Zhou Xuanji's talent was simply too outrageous. Moreover, he had the Tianxia map, so he had to be on guard. Sunlight Emperor did not take his eyes off Zhou Xuanji and said unhurriedly, "Don't worry about him. The ones who can be this emperor's opponents are the 10,000-year prince and Tian. As for Zhou Xuanji, I'll leave him for the next generation. If this emperor ascends, at least there will be someone who can withstand the Northern Wilderness region's fate." Emperor's emperor was already top in. From dynasty. He Emperor Zhou. Emperor Zhou and Yang and Emperor and Yang dynasty. Yang Zhou Emperor asked said and Zhou. Dynasty. Emperor Zhou. His tone was casual, but the boy named Fu Hao looked awkward. Great Emperor, there is no news about the Son of Fate. He might not be born yet. As for Tian, he has already come to the northern wilderness region, but his whereabouts are mysterious. He might be trying to become more powerful. The 10,000-year prince has not been found yet. According to my conjecture, the 10,000-year prince has just been born, so he should not be powerful. He might even be weaker than Zhou Xuanji, Fu Hao replied. He scratched his head. At the mention of Zhou Xuanji, he could not help but let his imagination run wild. He thought of something and continued, by the way, Dao Seeker has already hooked up with Zhou Xuanji. Apparently, he wants to assist Zhou Xuanji. Do we really not need to deal with him? Sunlight Emperor glanced at him and said intently, Fu Hao, you seem to want me to become enemies with everyone in the world. Fu Hao heard him and was covered in cold sweat. He did not dare to speak anymore. At Skyfall, Lin Chang'e was preparing to head to Duantian Cliff. The group was reminding him to be careful. If you encounter danger, try your best to avoid it. Zhou Xuanji patted Lin Chang'e's shoulder and said. He was now the world's second and had the Tianxia map. He was worried that someone would capture Lin Chang'e to threaten him. Lin Chang'e nodded and chuckled, don't worry. I'm at the great realization stage, after all. There are not many who can defeat me. Even if I can't defeat them, I can still escape. The others said a few words before Lin Chang'e left on his sword. Daoya old man divined for Lin Chang'e and said with a smile, luckily, this brat is lucky. He will not die at Duantian Cliff. Hearing his divination, the group was relieved. After that, Zhou Xuanji asked Daoya old man to concoct potions for him. He planned to speed up his cultivation. He wanted to break through to the great realization stage as soon as possible. The reason why he did not absorb others' cultivation to become more powerful was simple. He was not at the great realization stage, so it would not be of much help to him. There were not many great realization cultivators in the northern wilderness region. After the war between the two races, there were even fewer. Those who were still alive were the pillars of their respective factions. Zhou Xuanji took out the resources he got from Jihuang Demon Lord and Huangquan Drake King and asked Daoya old man to concoct potions. The others continued to cultivate. Jiang Shui stood beside Zhou Xuanji and asked, Xuanji, have you thought about the name of your sect? This matter had been delayed for many years. Now that the world's heroes had gathered, they could not keep saying that they were from Skyfall. I've thought about many things, such as the Divine Sword Way, 10,000 Sword Sect, Skyfall Sword Sect, Emperor Sword Court, and so on. Let me think about it, Zhou Xuanji said with a headache. It was too difficult to choose a name that was awe-inspiring and meaningful. Jiang Shui suggested, I've decided that you can add Xuanji to your sect's name because you are the best name. After that, she turned and left, not bothering him. Add my own name? Xuanji Sword Sect? Xuanji Divine Sword Way? What a chinibu. Zhou Xuanji shuddered and did not think too much about it. The most important thing now was to break through to the great realization stage. Just as he was busy cultivating, Xian Xianghua and the 36 demon leaders were secretly plotting. Sect Lord, will it really work? Qin Jing asked with a frown. The other demon leaders were also very nervous. Xian Xianghua said calmly, I have the final say. Go and prepare. I must see results within 3 years. Yes. The 36 demon leaders cried out in unison. All of them turned into black beams of light and flew in different directions. Xian Xianghua turned to look toward the south. Her eyes were filled with worry. Time passed. 2 months had passed. The world's heroes gathered at Duantian Cliff. Every human city was discussing this. They were all curious about what Yang Di was going to do. Soon, a shocking piece of news shook the entire northern wilderness region. Yang Di was going to establish an empire to become a great fate empire and lead the human race's fate. Chapter 288. At the top of Skyfall. Boom. Boom. Boom, a series of explosions came from a gigantic cauldron. Zhou Xuanji, who was half naked, sat in the cauldron. Massive amounts of spirit qi gathered above the cauldron, forming a vortex that was 9 meters wide. Daoya old man stood at the side, stroking his long beard and smiling. He was amazed in his heart. How powerful was this brat's body? He felt that Zhou Xuanji would break through to the great realization stage soon. At this moment, Haotian Boar King appeared behind him suddenly. Seeing that Zhou Xuanji was still cultivating, Haotian Boar King did not dare to disturb him. He told Daoya old man about the information he had gathered and left quickly. Great Fate Empire. What ambition! Daoya old man mumbled to himself with a serious expression. Once Yang Di succeeded, he would possess the human race's fate, and the fate of the human race would be in his hands. How could anyone feel at ease? Right now, no one could stop Yang Di. There was an insurmountable gap between Yang Di's power and the second in the world. However, to create a great fate empire was not something that could be done in a day. It would take decades or even centuries. He looked at Zhou Xuanji. How powerful would Zhou Xuanji be in decades? Time continued to pass. After 10 days and 10 nights, Zhou Xuanji finally flew out of the cauldron. His body was golden and was surrounded by lightning. He gave off a powerful aura. With a thought, he exited golden invincible form. He used his spirit energy to evaporate the medicinal liquid on his body before walking up to Jiang Shui. He asked her to use a water spell to bathe him and wipe his body. How do you feel? Jiang Shui asked. Her actions were gentle and she wiped him carefully. Zhou Xuanji muttered, "It's all right, but I'm still far from breaking through. The spirit energy required for the great realization stage is too much." Actually, he understood that he was just special. He cultivated in both energy and physique, and he cultivated the world Buddha art. As such, the amount of spirit energy required for each stage far exceeded that of others. It's all right. There's no hurry now. Jiang Shui smiled sweetly. She then told Zhou Xuanji about Yang Di creating a great fate empire, which made Zhou Xuanji narrow his eyes. Creating a great fate empire? This guy had Fate Emperor River and wanted to gather the fate of the northern wilderness region. Why did he feel like something was wrong? Could it be that he wanted to absorb all the karmic luck in the world to strengthen himself? He had once heard that there were cultivation techniques or divine abilities in this world that could absorb destiny. If a person's destiny was sucked dry, they would die very quickly. Without luck, it was just like the movie Final Destination in his previous life. An unexpected disaster could cause one to choke to death just by drinking water. Zhou Xuanji had never seen Sunlight Emperor before, so he did not dare to be sure. Perhaps he was doing this for the peace of the human race? After that, he and Jiang Shui returned to the house to rest. Time passed. 3 months later. Lin Chang'e returned to Skyfall, and Zhou Xuanji gathered everyone to hear about what had happened at Duantian Cliff. Actually, the banquet at Duantian Cliff didn't cause too much disturbance. Facing the powerful Sunlight Emperor, no one dared to oppose him. Lin Chang'e had a deep impression of Sunlight Emperor. He looked at Zhou Xuanji and said profoundly, "Yang Di gives off an unfathomable feeling, like a mortal facing a land immortal god. Not only that, but the boy beside him is also very powerful. The might that he gives off is even more powerful than that of Jihuang Demon Lord." A boy? Everyone was surprised and hurriedly asked. Lin Chang'e only knew that the boy's name was Fu Hao, and he was Yang Di's personal attendant. Fu Hao. I seem to have heard of this name somewhere. Daoya old man mumbled to himself but did not dare to divine it. Such a mysterious and powerful cultivator would surely bite back at him. Also, after the banquet, Fu Hao told us that the 10,000-year prince and Tian were born. He asked the human race to be careful and to keep this a secret. Lin Chang'e continued, and everyone's expression changed slightly. The 10,000-year prince would soar into the sky after he was born. Tian specialized in killing monarchical violet chi. He once fought the Diablo and Hegemon Sword Emperor alone. Neither of them was easy to deal with. Zhou Xuanji became anxious again. He could only feel at ease if he broke through to the great realization stage as soon as possible. Sigh. Why didn't any powerful villains come to find trouble with me? He sighed in his heart, feeling a little worried. At the south of the northern wilderness region, waves crashed onto the beach, and many birds circled above the sea. At this moment, a silhouette walked out from the sea. He was wearing a tattered black robe and had a head full of white hair. His face was expressionless, and he was drenched from head to toe as he walked toward the shore. He looked up at the end of the continent and mumbled, "Monarchical violet chi. There are 2 very powerful monarchical violet chi. If I can absorb them, I will become an immortal." He walked at a steady pace, leaving 2 rows of footprints on the beach. Behind him, the seawater suddenly turned red and spread rapidly. Corpses of sea demons floated up, and it was a horrifying sight. Time passed quickly. Another few months passed. After the banquet at Duantian Cliff, the world was shocked. Yang Di personally visited the 7 empires one by one. This made everyone understand that a great fate empire was about to rise. At Skyfall. Analyzed that the sword owner has reached 32 years old. Gotcha started. Ding. Congratulations, the sword owner obtained, glorious gold, soul-slaying demon dragon sword, gold, evil crimson sword. The sword spirit's voice resounded in Zhou Xuanji's mind, and he opened his eyes slowly while he was cultivating 2 legendary swords, one of which was glorious gold. Although it could not increase his power too much, it was at least 2 steps closer to 100 swords. Next, the information of the 2 legendary swords appeared before his eyes: sword name, soul-slaying demon dragon sword grade, glorious gold description, a legendary sword forged from the soul of a demon dragon. It can devour the souls of all creatures and contains the divine power of the demon dragon. Sword name, evil crimson sword grade, gold description. Legend has it that there are 7 colored legendary swords in the evil abyss. Each color represents a type of desire, and red represents rage. If all 7 legendary swords are gathered, they will merge into an ancient demonic sword. The 2 legendary swords were not bad. He took them out and familiarized himself with them. Until today, the number of his divine swords had already reached 69. He was getting closer to 100 swords. He had not used the 3rd form of the 10,000 sword dragon incantation, the 100 swords mode, and he was looking forward to it. Zhou Xuanji was in a good mood. He stored the 2 legendary swords into the supreme storage and continued to internalize qi. About 6 days later, an uninvited guest came to Skyfall. The world's second, Zhou Xuanji, come down and fight me. A cold and arrogant voice resounded across the sky. Even everyone at the top of Skyfall could hear it. They saw a man in purple standing on the tip of a leaf. His robe fluttered in the wind, and he had a handsome face. He wore a violet gold jade crown on his head and exuded a noble aura. His eyes were filled with disdain. Ning Zifeng pierced through the sea of clouds and flew over on his sword. Where did this worm come from? How dare you challenge our master? He laughed coldly. Without a word, he charged toward the man in purple with the ancestral dragon sword. The ancestral dragon that he transformed into was only 3 meters long. Compared to Zhou Xuanji, the difference was too great. The man in purple laughed with disdain. I'm the emperor and have the bloodline of an immortal. It's Zhou Xuanji's honor to fight me, yes, yes. Chapter 289. Celestial Bloodline? Ning Zifeng frowned slightly but did not slow down. He continued to charge toward the purple-robed man with an unstoppable force. Emperor? There are many emperors in this world. Who do you think you are? Remember, the person who defeated you is the Chaos Tide Sea's peerless sword immortal. His loud laughter was filled with arrogance. His arrogance was no less than the purple-robed man's. Facing the peerless sword immortal, the purple-robed man smiled. 2 beams of purple light shot out from his eyes. The 2 beams of purple light expanded rapidly. Silhouettes of purple soldiers appeared above them. They were translucent and looked like illusory shadows. Each of them held a weapon and charged toward the purple light, roaring continuously. Kill! Kill! Shouts filled the heavens and earth. At one glance, there were at least 1,000,000 of these purple soldiers. When they got close to Ning Zifeng, they leaped up and charged toward him like arrows. The 5-clawed golden dragon that Ning Zifeng had transformed into was engulfed instantly. He did not even have time to resist. This is my violet-souled divine army. How can an ordinary person like you defend against them? The purple-robed man laughed arrogantly. He did not take Ning Zifeng seriously at all. However, Ning Zifeng appeared behind him suddenly. 8-step sword lunge. Bastard! Have a taste of my sword. Ning Zifeng held his sword in his right hand and stabbed forward. The blade pierced into the purple-robed man's back. It was as though he was stabbing an illusory shadow. There was no obstruction and no blood. His pupils contracted, and he quickly retreated in fear, distancing himself from the purple-robed man. Who are you? Tell me your name. Ning Zifeng cried out loudly. Just when he spoke, Lin Chang'e flew down too. Little madman, you can't do it. He laughed loudly. The 2 of them surrounded the purple-robed man. The purple-robed man did not panic at all. Instead, he looked even more condescending. I'm Lu Tiange, the emperor of the Dongxing Empire. Hurry up and ask Zhou Xuanji to come down and fight with me. After I kill him, I still have to kill Yang Di. The purple-robed man laughed wildly, which made Ning Zifeng open his eyes wide. He cried out in shock, You are the emperor of Dongxing? How can it be? Why are you in the northern wilderness region? Lin Chang'e frowned and asked in astonishment, What? Isn't he from the northern wilderness region? Lu Tiange raised his right hand, and a ball of light condensed in his palm. The surface of the ball was wrapped in purple flames. It was beautiful, but it also had an extremely dangerous aura. He turned to look at Skyfall and cried out, Zhou Xuanji, if you don't come out, I will destroy this mountain and kill everyone on it. You should know that great realization cultivators cannot hurt me. His aura erupted, and the pressure of a great tribulation scattered immortal wreaked havoc in the world, causing the forest to shake and the wind to blow. He's from the boundless ocean, and he's the ruler of a part of the ocean. He became a great tribulation bodiless immortal 1,000 years ago. This is my first time seeing him, and I've only heard of his name, Ning Zifeng said with a serious expression. He shuddered at the thought of the legends about Lu Tiange. Lin Chang'e frowned. He didn't expect Lu Tiange to have such a powerful background. He did not know much about the overseas region. He had only heard Ning Zifeng mention some people and things occasionally. At this moment, a figure slowly descended from the clouds, emitting an extremely powerful aura. It was Zhou Xuanji. With the sky-extinguishing sword and ancient god's sword in his hands, 67 legendary swords levitated above his head. With a cold expression, he looked down at Lu Tiange and asked, You're from overseas? Lu Tiange smiled and looked back at him. His eyes were filled with the will to battle. I have people in the northern wilderness region. I've been monitoring the northern wilderness region and know the situation there. How can I not be curious about a genius like you? Just when he finished speaking, silhouettes of purple soldiers appeared behind him. Tens of thousands of soldiers and horses spread across the sky. It was a majestic sight. Zhou Xuanji chose to possess Saber Monarch Donghai's remnant soul straightaway and charged down. Since he could not avoid it, then he would fight. No matter if he came from overseas or within the ocean, he only needed to step on him. Roar, he activated the ancestral dragon's sword and transformed into a 5-clawed golden dragon. His body was radiating with a golden radiance, and his body was hundreds of meters long. He smashed toward Lu Tiange like a mountain range, which shocked Lu Tiange. The silhouettes of the purple soldiers were torn apart by the five-clawed golden dragon. In the blink of an eye, the five-clawed golden dragon came up to Lu Tiange and was about to swallow him. Lu Tiange put his palms together, and a purple radiance shone from his fingers. The radiance turned into a gigantic purple saber and penetrated the five-clawed golden dragon's head. The five-clawed golden dragon exploded immediately. Zhou Xuanji leaped up to Lu Tiange's head with his two swords and dozens of legendary swords. 10,000 ultimate steps. Lu Tiange's vision blurred. Before he could react, his throat was penetrated, and blood gushed out continuously. How can it be? How can your sword hurt me? He turned around and asked in astonishment. His divine ability allowed him to keep his body in an illusory state. With this divine ability, he was rarely injured. Zhou Xuanji turned around and glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. My sword can cut anything, he said. The Heavenly Soul legendary swords possessed the power of creation. Even if they were not real, they could still cut anything. Good. Very good. Lu Tiange wiped the blood off his neck and laughed wildly. The Purple Soul Divine Army swarmed toward Zhou Xuanji like a swarm of bees. They were so dense that they covered the sky. Zhou Xuanji snorted coldly and activated the Emperor's Way Thousand-Hand Sword Buddha. A majestic golden Buddha that was 500 meters tall appeared, and he entered it. Thousands of arms grew out from the back of the golden Buddha, each holding a golden sword. Divine might descended. Ha! The thousand-hand sword Buddha opened its eyes, and two rays of golden radiance swept across the heavens and earth. Even Lu Tiange had to close his eyes. When he opened his eyes, the thousand-hand sword Buddha's storm-like attacks landed on him. Boom! 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 Thousands of gigantic golden swords slashed wildly and destroyed the purple soldier silhouettes. The ground crumbled, and a violent gale swept up trees. The horrifying sword gale swept across thousands of miles. Ning Zifeng and Lin Changge were forced back. Lu Tiange, on the other hand, was tongue-tied. His face was filled with shock. What divine ability is this? He cried out in shock. Before the thousand-hand sword Buddha, he felt so tiny. It was like an ordinary person facing a high and mighty god. He trembled, and his soul trembled. In a short while, the Purple Soul Divine Army was completely destroyed. The thousand-hand sword Buddha looked at Lu Tiange with its cold and majestic eyes, which made Lu Tiange break out in a cold sweat. Emperor Dongsheng? That's all. Zhou Xuanji's voice came. He felt that Lu Tiange was at most comparable to Huangquan Drake King, but not even the injured Jihuang Demon Lord. Lu Tiange was infuriated. He stretched out his arms, and streams of purple dragon chi shot out from his body toward Zhou Xuanji. The gigantic thousand-hand sword Buddha slashed and slashed at Zhou Xuanji without any pattern. It was purely based on speed and brute force. Sounds of explosions came one after another. It was like a grand display of fireworks that blossomed in the sky. The thousand-hand sword Buddha was getting closer to Lu Tiange. He could already feel the tip of the sword. Damn! He has not even reached the great realization stage, and yet he is so powerful. No wonder he could become the second in the world in the northern wilderness region, Lu Tiange thought with gritted teeth. He had not tasted such helplessness for a long time. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 290. Tell me, what are you trying to do in the northern wilderness region? Zhou Xuanji, who had transformed into the thousand-hand sword Buddha, cried out with a deep voice. His voice was like thunder and resounded across the sky. Lu Tiange looked up at him and opened his hands. Two curved blades appeared in his hands. The curved blades were engraved with tadpole-like black patterns, which looked eerie and horrifying. What am I trying to do? To dominate the northern wilderness region, of course. Lu Tiange laughed coldly as he swung his blades. Countless curved blades appeared from the two blades. They were all the same, and there were millions of them. They charged toward the thousand-hand sword Buddha from different directions like an inescapable net. Why are all of this brat's attacks so fancy? Zhou Xuanji cursed in his heart. He was a little envious of this scene. He had been fantasizing about controlling 10,000 legendary swords, and Lu Tiange completed it for him. Although it was spectacular, it was not enough to defeat him. The thousand-hand sword Buddha ignored the curved blades and flew toward Lu Tiange. All the golden arms raised their swords and slashed at Lu Tiange. They were like afterimages, and a powerful gale blew down, crumbling the ground. Lu Tiange quickly dodged. He turned around and realized that the thousand-hand sword Buddha had already disappeared. He was stunned. A chill came from his back. He turned around and lashed out with his leg, which was like a sharp whip. The wind was sharp. Pish. The sky-extinguishing sword pierced into his chest, but his leg was still dozens of meters away from Zhou Xuanji. He felt that his spirit energy was being sucked away by the swords and was greatly shocked. Swoosh. 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 Numerous legendary swords flew toward him and pierced into his body. He could not dodge in time. In the blink of an eye, he looked like a hedgehog. Blood spurted out from all over his body, and his body twitched slightly. The battle ended. Ning Zifeng and Lin Changge were dumbfounded. Isn't this too powerful? In their eyes, Zhou Xuanji completely crushed Lu Tiange. No matter how many spells Lu Tiange used, he could not hurt Zhou Xuanji. The entire battle took less time than they could finish a pot of wine. Weak. Zhou Xuanji walked up to him and snorted coldly. This guy can help me break through to the great realization stage. Lu Tiange was greatly shocked. Fear enveloped his heart. He asked with a trembling voice, "What did you do to me?" "Why my spirit energy?" He suddenly widened his eyes. Could this be the reason why Zhou Xuanji's cultivation was ridiculously high despite his young age? Zhou Xuanji did not reply and gripped the sky-extinguishing sword with his right hand, absorbing his spirit energy. In just a short while, half of Lu Tiange's spiritual power was sucked away. "I admit defeat. I was wrong. Spare me, brother Zhou." Lu Tiange shouted in fear. He didn't want to die. It wasn't easy for him to get to where he was today, so how could he fall and waste all his previous efforts? Zhou Xuanji was indifferent. "Big brother. I was wrong. Senior Zhou. What will make you forgive me? I don't want to die. Grandpa, please spare my life." "Can I call you Grandpa?" "Ancestor." Seeing that Lu Tiange was about to cry, Zhou Xuanji rolled his eyes and stopped absorbing his spirit energy. Even so, Lu Tiange felt that his cultivation level had regressed a lot, and the spiritual power in his body was almost depleted, which made him sad and angry. Zhou Xuanji stared at him and said, "Either be my dog or die. Choose one." Running dogs. Such a humiliating word. Lu Tiange was furious but dared not to say anything. "Master." He forced a smile and said. Zhou Xuanji stored his sword and carried him like a dog, flying toward the peak of Skyfall. The second-generation disciples, who were watching from the mountainside, were all amazed. "He's so powerful. I feel that the Grand Teacher's power will grow by leaps and bounds every now and then. I feel the same way too. Compared to him, we are so stupid. Don't compare yourself with the Grand Teacher. He's the world's second most powerful cultivator, the top genius. Emperor's Way thousand-hand sword Buddha is so powerful. I really want to learn it." "Impossible. Even personal disciples can't learn such a sword technique." Lin Changge and Ning Zifeng looked at each other and saw the will to fight in each other's eyes. Before they met Zhou Xuanji, they all felt that they were powerful and awesome. But now, they felt that they were so weak and puny. Sigh. The heavenly law is unfair. On the other side. On the peak. Zhou Xuanji threw Lu Tiange onto the ground. Xian Xianghua, Jiang Shui, Daoya Old Man, Huang Lianxin, and Zhou Xiaoqi surrounded him. As for the others, they were not on the peak. Instead, they were scattered around Skyfall to cultivate. I want to take him as my slave. Is there any way to restrain him? Zhou Xuanji asked as he looked at Xian Xianghua, and Daoya Old Man. Xian Xianghua said with a deep voice, I have an insect that attaches itself to the inner pellet and astral infant. It can make people wish they were dead. Lu Tiange, who was lying on the ground, shuddered. Such a vicious woman. He immediately looked up and cried out, Master, I will never betray you. I, Lu Tiange, am a man of my words. In the face of death, he could no longer care about the dignity of the emperor. I have a divine ability called oath. After he makes a promise, if he dares to break it, his spirit energy will be in chaos, his chi and blood will be unstable, and his fate will gather. Daoya Old Man said with squinted eyes as he stroked his long beard. A great tribulation scattered immortal could indeed be taken in. Oath divine ability? The group was shocked. There's such a divine ability? Lu Tiange shuddered and looked at Daoya Old Man fearfully. This old man is so ruthless. After that, Daoya Old Man took out a drop of his essence blood and began casting the spell. What venomous oath do you want him to make? Let him repeat it. Daoya Old Man said to Zhou Xuanji. Everyone looked at him with curiosity. Even Xian Xianghua was the same. She thought to herself, this brat has learned a lot. Zhou Xuanji muttered to himself. Lu Tiange swallowed his saliva and pretended to be calm. I respect Zhou Xuanji as my father. If I dare to harm Zhou Xuanji or any human or demon related to him, I will die a horrible death. If I lie to Zhou Xuanji, I will be struck by lightning. Whatever Zhou Xuanji asks me to do, I will do it because he's my father. After Zhou Xuanji finished speaking, the summit fell into silence. Everyone was trying to hold in their laughter. Lu Tiange's face was red with anger, and his eyes were filled with fury. This was a complete humiliation to him. This was intolerable. He gritted his teeth and said, Zhou Xuanji. Are you really going to bully me? Seeing this, Zhou Xuanji took out the swine-culling sword and walked up to him. He pierced the sword into his abdomen and began absorbing his spirit energy. Lu Tiange's expression changed drastically. He wanted to resist, but he could not. Seems like this guy has a backbone. Huang Lianxin covered her mouth and laughed. No one stopped Zhou Xuanji. Lu Tiange was too arrogant just now. A while later. Wait. Stop. Lu Tiange cried out suddenly, and Zhou Xuanji stopped too. His eyes turned sharp. He took a deep breath and said, Zhou Xuanji, I'm Emperor Dongsheng, the descendant of an immortal. Zhou Xuanji continued to activate world internalization. Lu Tiange was anxious. Can't you let me finish what I want to say? I respect Zhou Xuanji as my father. If I dare to harm Zhou Xuanji or any human or demon related to him, I will die a horrible death. If I lie to Zhou Xuanji, I will be struck by lightning. The fourth update. I have already updated all the information about the legendary swords in the forum. Those who want to know more can take a look. The attributes of the legendary swords will be updated regularly. There will also be voting for various storyline characters. It's worth your participation. Calm. Wonderful book house. Calm. Chapter 291. After Lu Tiange swore, Daoya Old Man took his essence blood. He then asked for a drop of Zhou Xuanji's essence blood and combined them. Essence blood referred to fresh blood and essence qi. The essence blood of different humans or demons was different. In the cultivation world, it could be used as an identity. For example, enchanted artifacts and enchanted treasures required essence blood to recognize their owners. Daoya old man waved his right hand, and the essence blood in his hand dissipated into the heavens and earth. It was invisible and soundless. That's it? Zhou Xuanji asked with a frown. Why did he feel like a fraud? Daoya old man nodded and said proudly, of course. This divine ability is not simple. In the entire northern wilderness region, there are less than 5 people who know this divine ability. Xian Xianghua asked curiously, you and Xuanhe received an ancient legacy. Which powerhouse's legacy is it? A long time ago, Daoya old man and Xuanhe divine monk were ordinary. After they received the legacy of an ancient powerhouse, they were reborn. Why should I tell you? Daoya old man said arrogantly. He used to be extremely afraid of Xian Xianghua. But now, he was not afraid. If you want to marry my grand disciple, you must support me well first. Xian Xianghua's eyes turned cold, and a murderous aura emanated from her. He was so frightened that he quickly hid behind Zhou Xuanji. Lu Tiange sat on the ground in despair. Scenes of the past flashed before his eyes. If this were to spread to the Dongxing Empire, would he still have the face to be the emperor? Suddenly, he regretted giving in to her. But he really did not want to die like this. Once he died, he would have nothing left. Zhou Xuanji sat on the ground and crossed his arms in front of his chest. Tell me, which sea region are you from? He said softly. He heard from Ning Zifeng that the ocean was much bigger than the continent. The Chaos Tide Sea was only a small map. Even so, there were great tribulation scattered immortals, and more than one of them. He had always suspected that there were many powerful cultivators overseas, and they might be more powerful than the northern wilderness region. If so, why did they not attack the northern wilderness region? There must be a lot of unknown secrets behind this. Lu Tiange's expression changed, but he decided to bear with it. After all, this was the northern wilderness region, and no one knew him. After he returned, he could remove the divine ability and deny everything. Therefore, he told them about his background. It turned out that there were 108 sea regions in the ocean, with the northern wilderness region as the center. There was a powerful barrier between these sea regions and the northern wilderness region, and one could only enter and exit through the illusory void hole. The void was flowing, located in the sea water, unable to be seen with the naked eye. From ancient times until now, no one could calculate how many voids there were. A long time ago, the empires of the various sea regions had started planning to invade the northern wilderness region and occupy the land resources. However, the void was unstable, and they could not invade on a large scale. Moreover, the sanctums of the northern wilderness region were guarding the borders of the sea regions, so the sea region empires could not invade the northern wilderness region. In the past, there were many heroes and geniuses in the northern wilderness region. Ever since the hegemon sword emperor ascended, the northern wilderness region had fallen into desolation. Tens of thousands of years ago, there were several people like Sunlight Emperor in every era, even in the double digits. It was said that the northern wilderness region was originally much larger, but because of the battles between the strong, many lands were sunk into the sea. 500 years ago, someone from the Dongxing Empire accidentally entered the northern wilderness region. That person was loyal and devoted, and since then, he had been gathering information for the Dongxing Empire. Lu Tiange thought that the northern wilderness region had fallen into desolation, so he searched for the void and entered it. But reality gave him a heavy blow. He cursed in his heart. It's all that guy's fault. How did he gather information? TSK. This guy's mood is the same as mine. He thought that he could do whatever he wanted after coming to the northern wilderness region, but... Haha. Ning Zifeng laughed mercilessly, which made Lu Tiange's veins bulge on his forehead. We are all from the sea region. Why make things difficult for each other? Zhou Xuanji asked a few more questions, and Lu Tiange answered them honestly. There were empires in every sea region, which meant that there were hundreds of empires overseas. However, the population of these empires was far less than the empires in the northern wilderness region. After he finished asking, he asked Lu Tiange to find a place to stay at the waist of the mountain. Zhou Xuanji asked Lin Changge and Ning Zifeng to keep a close eye on him. This person was a great tribulation scattered immortal after all, and he had many tricks up his sleeves. Seems like this world is more exciting than we imagined, Daoya old man sighed in amazement. After hearing Lu Tiange's words, he suddenly felt that the northern wilderness region was very small. A bunch of natives from overseas dares to encroach on the northern wilderness region? What a fool's dream. Xian Xianghua snorted coldly. The others sighed in amazement as well. Zhou Xuanji was thinking about another question. Who set up the barrier around the northern wilderness region? After Lu Tiange joined Skyfall, he ended up as Zhang Quanglan. Every few days, Zhou Xuanji would find him and absorb all the spirit energy in his body. At first, he was furious because he thought that Zhou Xuanji treated him like a pig or a dog. 3 months later, Lu Tiange was numb, and his body became noticeably thinner. During this period, he saw Zhang Quanglan. The two met, and their gazes met. Their silence was filled with sorrow. With the great tribulation scattered immortal providing him with endless spirit energy, Zhou Xuanji was getting closer and closer to the great realization stage. Another 4 months passed, and he finally had an opportunity to break through. He left Skyfall and went to undergo the tribulation 100 miles away. He took out the thunderclap sword and was prepared to absorb the power of heavenly lightning. He brought Lu Tiange along on purpose so that the latter could watch from the side. Boom, thunderclouds gathered, and a horrifying heavenly might spread across the wasteland. There were no trees within a radius of a few thousand meters, only weeds. Under the cover of the thunderclouds, the world was dark and looked extremely bleak. Lu Tiange was 100 meters away from Zhou Xuanji. Lu Tiange was completely different from half a year ago. He was no longer as arrogant as before. He looked at Zhou Xuanji with a complicated expression and cursed in his heart. To him, Zhou Xuanji was provoking him on purpose. Zhou Xuanji was absorbing his spirit energy to obtain an opportunity to break through, and he had to watch from the side. It was an absolute humiliation. Zhou Xuanji sat down with the thunderclap sword hovering above his head. He activated golden invincibility, and strands of heavenly lightning coiled around him like dragons and snakes. An extremely powerful aura exploded from his body, causing the ground to tremble slightly. At the same time, heavenly lightning appeared in the thunderclouds like numerous lightning dragons tumbling in the sea of clouds. Roar, a world-shaking roar came from the sky. Lu Tiange looked up, and in the next second, he opened his eyes wide. A gigantic Qilin head emerged from the thunderclouds. It was formed by interweaving heavenly lightning, and it was as huge as a mountain. Its eyes were beaming with a powerful radiance as it looked down at the ground like a supreme ruler. Qilin Divine Tribulation. How can it be? This is a heavenly tribulation that only great tribulation scattered immortals can encounter. Lu Tiange cried out in shock. He had seen a powerhouse encountering this tribulation before. The world-destroying scene was still fresh in his memory. He immediately distanced himself from Zhou Xuanji to avoid being accidentally injured by the heavenly tribulation. Qilin Divine Tribulation. Such a good name. But it's nothing before my legendary sword. Zhou Xuanji laughed softly. Just when he spoke, bolts of heavenly lightning struck down crazily. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 292. An hour later. Lu Tiange swallowed his saliva and tried to stay calm, but his body couldn't stop trembling. What did he see? When Zhou Xuanji was breaking through to the great realization stage, he had encountered the scattered immortal tribulation, and he had passed the tribulation unscathed with a single sword. How could this be? That was the Qilin Sage tribulation. How could that sword block it? Moreover, if he was not mistaken, the sword seemed to have absorbed the lightning. The wasteland was filled with charred smoke, and there were potholes everywhere, formed by the heavenly lightning. Zhou Xuanji levitated in midair. His spirit energy exploded out, forming a tornado around him with a powerful aura. He had already put away the thunderclap sword. After absorbing the Qilin divine tribulation, the thunderclap sword would level up again. His cultivation base had already reached Mahayana level 1. Sword owner has reached the Mahayana realm. Gacha begins. Ding! Congratulations, sword owner has obtained Amethyst, Ghost Weep Sword, Sealing Dream Sword Formation. The sword spirit's voice resounded in Zhou Xuanji's mind. Next, 3 lines of words appeared before his eyes. Sword name, Ghost Weep Sword grade, Amethyst, description, a sword that makes thousands of ghosts wail in the netherworld. It possesses an extremely strong murderous aura that can easily make people lose their rationality. Zhou Xuanji did not take out the Ghost Weep sword but looked at Lu Tiange. Facing his gaze, Lu Tiange hurriedly lowered his head in fear. Seeing Zhou Xuanji's domineering tribulation, he only felt fear in his heart. You can leave. Zhou Xuanji said slowly. After breaking through to the great realization stage, he no longer needed Lu Tiange. Lu Tiange was stunned. He couldn't believe his ears. He cautiously asked, "Where are we going?" Could it be? His heart began to beat faster. "You can go wherever you want." Zhou Xuanji replied calmly. It was not suitable to leave Lu Tiange in Skyfall. His existence was a threat to everyone else. It was impossible for him to be completely convinced. "Are you really going to let me go like this?" Lu Tiange asked in surprise. He had a surreal feeling. He had thought that it would take decades or even centuries for him to have a chance to escape. Zhou Xuanji smiled mysteriously. "No matter where you go, we will meet again one day." Lu Tiange shuddered in fear and immediately flew away. After he left, Zhou Xuanji took out Heavenly Retribution Martial Song. Intimidating Spirit Legendary Sword. This was the first time he had taken out this sword. Ever since he obtained this sword, he had been looking forward to it. After all, this was the strongest sword he had so far. A crystal broadsword appeared in his hand. The sword was crystal blue in color, and its blade was sharp. There were intricate patterns on it that looked like the scales of a divine dragon or a Qilin. It looked very mystical, and it was obvious that it was not an ordinary sword. With Heavenly Retribution Martial Song in his hand, Zhou Xuanji felt a coolness seep into his palm. He subconsciously poured his spirit energy into the Heavenly Retribution Martial Song. Boom! The ground beneath his feet collapsed, and a horrifying aura exploded out. With Zhou Xuanji at the center, a visible gale swept out in all directions. Zhou Xuanji quickly cut off his spirit energy, and cold sweat covered his forehead. So powerful. He muttered to himself, his eyes filled with surprise. After breaking through to the Mahayana realm, his spiritual energy had leaped in quality and quantity, becoming more than 10 times stronger than before. Just now, when he had used Heavenly Retribution Wu Chu's power, he had felt as if the entire world would be destroyed by him. This feeling of strength was unprecedented, and it caused him to shudder with fear. As expected of the intimidating spirit legendary sword. Too powerful. Suddenly, a bold idea came to his mind. Who would win the battle between him and Yang Di? He shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Before Yang Di offended him, he would not seek trouble with him. His priority was to continue cultivating. He wanted to be the top cultivator in the next World Millennium Duel. From then on, he would continue to be the top cultivator, surpassing his predecessors and reaching the pinnacle of history. Back at the top of Skyfall, everyone gathered around him. After knowing that Zhou Xuanji had successfully broken through, they were all very happy. The more powerful Zhou Xuanji was, the safer they would be. No one objected to Lu Tiange's departure. "Master, do you have the confidence to defeat Yang Di now?" Zhao Zongjian asked with great excitement. Previously, Zhou Xuanji had been emphasizing on breaking through to the great realization stage as soon as possible, and they were all looking forward to it. Zhou Xuanji smiled mysteriously and said, "I have never seen Yang Di before, so I don't know how powerful he is. However, I feel that no one in the world can kill me. Before breaking through, he could already defeat First Tribulation scattered immortals. Now that he had broken through and obtained a legendary sword of a higher grade, how could he not be more powerful? Yang Di's cultivation might have already reached Third Tribulation scattered immortal. In the current world, only he has reached that level, Xian Xianghua said. She was a Second Tribulation scattered immortal. Great Tribulation scattered immortals were divided into 9 tribulations. Normally, a Second Tribulation scattered immortal could dominate the world. Zhou Xuanji said with a smile, no matter how powerful he is, we just need to cultivate hard. In a few years, we should let the second generation disciples go out to train. Just training hard was not enough. They needed actual combat experience. He planned to arrange for the second generation disciples to train in batches. At the same time, he would give them the opportunity to take in disciples. Every time they went out, he would arrange for people to protect them in secret. The group began to talk about the future plans of the sect. Zhou Xuanji sat on the ground and began to inherit the Sealing Dream Sword formation. Memories flowed into his mind, isolating his consciousness from the current world. The Sealing Dream Sword formation was a sealing sword formation. Once hit, one's spirit energy and senses would be sealed, and one would become a puppet. This sword formation was very domineering, and it made up for one of Zhou Xuanji's shortcomings. Even though he was unparalleled in the way of the sword, he was lacking in other areas. For example, he needed Daoya Old Man's help to seal an enemy's cultivation. As for spells of the 5 elements, he did not care too much. He could rely on the way of the sword in battle, and he had Zhang Shui to help him in daily life. Even if he could not, he could store some scrolls of spells of the 5 elements and use them like tools. After he finished inheriting the memories, he took out dozens of legendary swords and began to practice. Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Congjian, Ning Zifeng, Lin Changge, Huang Lianxin, and Beixiao Wangjian immediately came over and watched excitedly. At the same time, news of Zhou Xuanji breaking through to the Great Realization stage spread throughout Skyfall. All of the disciples and demons discussed this excitedly. I feel that the Grand Teacher's breakthrough speed is even faster than ours. His cultivation stage is so high. How far do you think the gap between the Grand Teacher and Yang Di is? I think it's about there. The Grand Teacher's power has already surpassed our imagination. Can there be someone more powerful than him in the Northern Wilderness region? I feel that the day of establishing the sect is getting closer and closer. Everyone, cultivate well. In the future, there will definitely be more geniuses joining Skyfall. We cannot be surpassed. After a while, news of Zhou Xuanji breaking through to the Great Realization stage spread among the demons and then into the human race. After all, there were many demons around Skyfall, and there would always be demons who could not control their mouths. A 32-year-old Great Realization cultivator. Everyone in the world discussed Zhou Xuanji again. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 293. In an inn in Great Zhou's royal city. A storyteller was waving his fan as he spoke. Nearly 100 customers were sitting around him. That day, the sky was clear for thousands of miles at Skyfall. Suddenly, thunderclouds gathered, and a demonic wind blew. So, it was the arrival of the demon sovereign. He declared that he would take the Tianxia map and asked the Sword Emperor to come out and accept his death. Who is the Sword Emperor? He's the most powerful cultivator in Great Zhou's history and also the most powerful prodigy in the entire Northern Wilderness region. How could he be so noisy? The storyteller looked like he was in his early 40s. He wore a hat and had a slightly tanned face. When he talked about the key points, his eyes would widen, which made the customers' hearts jump. He would tell Zhou Xuanji's story every day. Some stories had been repeated hundreds of times, but he would still tell them because there were so many people who liked to listen to him. Ever since Zhou Xuanji became the world's second, very few people called him Sword God Zhou. Instead, they called him the Sword Emperor. Since ancient times, the word emperor represented the supreme meaning. Sword god Zhou, on the other hand, sounded like a swindler. Of course, calling him Sword God was just as impressive. I heard that the Sword Emperor has broken through to the Great Realization stage. Is it true? Before he broke through, he could already kill the demon sovereign. Does he have the capability to become the world's top cultivator? A customer asked curiously, which attracted the attention of the others. The storyteller slapped his fan on his palm and said with a smile, "The Sword Emperor has indeed broken through to the Great Realization stage and set a new record as the youngest Great Realization cultivator. But it's still not enough to defeat Yang Di. Yang Di has been the world's top cultivator for 3 consecutive times and has dominated the northern wilderness region for 3,000 years. It's too difficult to defeat him. He's the most promising person to become a great emperor, and his future achievements will not be lower than the hegemon Sword Emperor." He began to talk about how powerful Yang Di was, which made the customers gasp in shock. At a corner of the inn, 2 women dressed as men sat. They were Princess Xuanya and Princess Lingling. Princess Xuanya had the rare Dao form. With the help of Zhou Qingxin's resources, she had already reached the Soul Fountain stage. Princess Lingling was not as talented as her, but because of her Minghun relationship with Zhou Xuanji, she was treated well. The 2 felt bored staying in the palace, so they would often come out to play. "Sister, why do people always associate Xuanji with Yang Di? There's no enmity between them?" Princess Lingling asked in confusion. Yang Di had an extremely good reputation, and Zhou Xuanji was a straightforward and upright person. Both of them were helping the human race get rid of demons, so there was no reason for them to fight. Princess Xuanya rolled her eyes at her and said unpleasantly, "There's no first in literature, and there's no second in martial arts. With Zhou Xuanji's abilities, he will fight to be the top cultivator in the world sooner or later. You've been in the royal palace for too long and don't understand the world well enough." Princess Lingling did not really understand. Was it that important to be number 1 in the world? That's right. Which of us cultivators doesn't want to become the world's number 1? A chuckle came from the side as a black-robed youth walked over and sat down. His face was handsome, and his long hair was coiled into a red string. His figure was tall and straight, and he had an imposing appearance. Princess Xuanya glanced at him and said, "Who told you to sit here?" The black-clothed young man chuckled and said, "My name is Biyao, and I consider myself extraordinary. My goal is to become number 1 in the world. I have met 2 ladies by chance, and your smiles have moved my heart. Are you married?" Princess Xuanya and Princess Lingling looked at each other, speechless. Where did this idiot come from? Biyao could tell what they were thinking. He shook his head and smiled as he said, "You might think that I'm boasting shamelessly, but I do have the qualifications to become the top cultivator in the world. Within 100 years, I will defeat Yang Di and the Sword Emperor. At that time, I will make you the great emperor's wives." How awe-inspiring that would be. The 2 women heard him and rolled their eyes. They got up and left. Looking at their backs, Biyao did not chase after them. The corner of his lips curled up as he poured himself a cup of wine and mumbled, "Interesting. Tens of thousands of years have passed, yet no one knows of my name. It seems like I'll have to turn the world upside down for someone to know of my prowess." Halfway up the mountain at Skyfall. Training with the sword requires one's heart and cannot focus on one move. Moves are dead, but the sword is alive. Only by moving with one's heart can one establish a connection with the sword. Zhou Xuanji sat on a large rock. In front of him, 80 second-generation disciples were training with the sword. They were in an orderly formation, and the formation was quite good. Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Zongjian, and Beishao Wangjian stood behind him and watched silently. At this moment, Zhou Xiaoqi ran over with the 3-eyed drought rodent in his mouth. "Master, it found another treasure, but it's protected by restrictive barriers. We need support," Zhou Xiaoqi said as he blinked. This little guy was no longer innocent. After following the little black snake and Chongming demon monarch for so long, it was full of evil tricks. Zhou Xuanji did not even look at it and said straightforwardly, "Let Liuwu demon wolf go with you." Okay. Zhou Xiaoqi brought the three-eyed drought rodent and left happily. A while later. "What do you think about letting the disciples form teams?" Zhou Xuanji asked. Xiao Jinghong and the other two were stunned and asked how they should form teams. If Skyfall wants to survive for a long time, it must be like the other sects and accept missions from various places to uphold justice. But it's too dangerous to go out alone. I want them to form teams of 2 so that they can look out for each other. Zhou Xuanji said. Along the way, he was leading a team. If he was injured, someone would heal him. If he encountered something he did not understand, someone would explain it to him. It was very difficult to survive alone in this world. That's possible. There are exactly 80 people, 2 to a team. But if someone dies, what about the last person? Zhao Zongjian nodded, but he had his doubts too. Zhou Xuanji replied, "That's why we need to discuss this. Next year, we will pick a batch of disciples with the highest cultivation to go out and take in the 3rd-generation disciples. We can't have a lot of people, because we will need people to entertain guests when we open our sect. How could they entertain guests with less than 100 people? Just Great Zhou alone would send more than 100 people." Xiao Jinghong immediately requested to lead the team. But Zhou Xuanji did not agree. The first batch of disciples must be harvested by powerful cultivators. Although Xiao Jinghong had already begun to break through to astral projection, it was not enough. Su Yang listened to their conversation, and his eyes began to wander around. He knew that his chance had come. The more disciples he had, the more secure his position as the eldest senior apprentice brother would be. 2 hours later. Haotian Boar King went up the mountain suddenly. He half knelt beside Zhou Xuanji and said with a muffled voice, "Master, someone called Meng Tianlang is here. He said that he is here to fulfill the promise of slavery. But he brought someone with him. His cultivation is unfathomable, just like Lu Tiange." Having heard that, Zhou Xuanji frowned. He still remembered Meng Tianlang. He was Xiao Jinghong's nemesis and close friend. But another person with cultivation like Lu Tiange? Since when were great tribulations scattered immortals everywhere? Smiley face, smiley face. Chapter 294. Bring them up, Zhou Xuanji ordered. After Haotian Boar King left, he asked Zhao Zongjian to bring the disciples to another place to train. Xiao Jinghong frowned and muttered to himself, "Where did Meng Tianlang get acquainted with great tribulation scattered immortals?" Meng Tianlang was ranked 2nd on Great Zhou's hero ranking board. Han Shenbo was 1st, and Xiao Jinghong was 3rd. But now, Zhou Xuanji no longer thought highly of him. "You will know when they come up," Zhou Xuanji replied calmly. Zhou Xuanji replied calmly. If a powerful enemy attacked, he would sense it. But now, he did not sense any danger. This meant that the enemy was not a threat to him. A while later. Haotian Boar King flew up with 2 people. One of them was Meng Tianlang. He was not wearing armor but a simple martial robe. He looked a little reserved. The other person looked to be in his 40s. He was dressed strangely in blue clothes and a white cloak. There was a golden crown on his head with a fist-sized ruby embedded in it. "Senior." "Zhou," Meng Tianlang cupped his fist and said awkwardly. When he first met Zhou Xuanji was still a kid, and Meng Tianlang did not take him seriously. But now, Zhou Xuanji had grown up and become the famous Sword Emperor. He had to treat him like a junior. "Sword Emperor, now that I've seen you today, you're indeed impressive." The man with the golden crown chuckled. His tone was neither humble nor arrogant. Xiao Jinghong stared at him and asked with a deep voice, "Who are you?" Meng Tianlang looked at Xiao Jinghong with a complicated expression. He could sense that Xiao Jinghong's cultivation had caught up to his. He might have even surpassed him. My name is Han Daozi, the ancestor of Tianlang. I've lived in seclusion for thousands of years. Everyone thought that I was dead, including my descendants, the man with the golden crown said with a smile. The golden-crowned man said with a smile. Xiao Jinghong and Zhao Congjian's eyes widened. Beishao Wangjian looked confused. Who was Han Daozi? Didn't you die in Xian Xianghua's hands? Xiao Jinghong asked curiously. Han Daozi was quite famous. He was once ranked 9th in the world and fought with the top evil cultivator, Xian Xianghua. He died in the snowy mountains in the north. Han Daozi smiled and said, if I did not die, the righteous sects would have brought my entire clan to fight the Tanhua sect. My death can save my clan. In the past, when Xian Xianghua was the number 1 in the world, the righteous path had started a war. If she didn't participate in the war, she would be called an evil demon. Zhou Xuanji and the others had also heard about the war during that period. In Xian Xianghua's words, a bunch of ants overestimated themselves. If not for her magnanimity, she would have slaughtered the entire righteous path long ago. Ever since that battle, the cultivators of the righteous path began to smear her name and exaggerate her sins. Why have you come? Zhou Xuanji asked calmly. He could sense the spirit energy in Han Daozi's body, and it was as powerful as Lu Tiange's. He was most likely a first tribulation scattered immortal. Han Daozi's smile faded, and he said seriously, I want to entrust this task to the descendants of the Han clan. I know you well. You have many geniuses under your command, and even the exquisite sword heart is willing to be your disciple. This shows that your teaching ability is very strong. Meng Tianlang fell to his knees with a thud, his forehead touching the ground. Wait. Isn't his surname Meng? Why is he a member of the Han family? Northern Sword Valiant could not help but ask. His brows were tightly knitted, and he was full of conflict with Meng Tianlang. Back then, it wasn't that Zhou Xuanji didn't give Meng Tianlang a chance, but he didn't show up. Now that Zhou Xuanji was famous throughout the world, he wanted to climb up the tree. His mother is a descendant of the Han clan, and to this day, the Han clan only has one descendant left. Before, this boy didn't know how to appreciate kindness and didn't keep his promise. It's his fault, hurry up and apologize. Han Daozi slapped the back of Meng Tianlang's head and said in a low voice. Apologies. Meng Tianlang knelt on the ground and said in a low voice. Zhou Xuanji frowned. Even so, he was not moved. Perhaps Meng Tianlang had great talent, but he did not like people who went back on their word. I won't hide it from you, this boy's fate is that of a 10,000-year prince. If it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have been able to divine his whereabouts. In the current world, your talent is the greatest. If you can take him as a disciple, he will definitely soar to the sky and serve your sect in the future. Han Daozi continued to speak, his tone sincere. 10,000-year prince. Everyone's expressions changed. How is that possible? He's a 10,000-year prince? What proof do you have? Beishao Wangjian cried out in shock. All along, they had thought that Zhou Xuanji was a 10,000-year prince. How could they believe Han Daozi so easily? Han Daozi smiled and said, if you don't believe me, ask Xian Xianghua and Daoya old man to come down. With their abilities, they will surely be able to see Tianlang's fate. It's as vast as the ocean, unparalleled in the world. Zhou Xuanji immediately gave Xiao Jinghong a look and asked him to invite Xian Xianghua and Daoya old man. At this moment, Xian Xianghua appeared beside him, followed by Daoya old man. The two of them looked at Meng Tianlang closely. Such boundless fate, could it be true? Xian Xianghua had a strange look on her face. Back then, she had mistakenly thought that Zhou Xuanji was a 10,000-year prince, which was why she had been paying attention to him. In the end, she was won over by Zhou Xuanji's charisma. If the 10,000-year prince had appeared from the start, she might not have followed Zhou Xuanji so closely. Daoya old man frowned and muttered, this boy's fate is indeed incredible. Even Jihuang demon lord did not have such powerful fate. As for Zhou Xuanji, because his fate had been changed when he was young, his fate was not obvious and could not be observed. He's a 10,000-year prince. Are you really willing to give him to me? Zhou Xuanji asked as he looked at Han Daozi. Because of Xian Xianghua's appearance, Han Daozi's expression became a bit unnatural, but he hid it very well. He smiled and said, the world is going to be chaotic in the future. I feel that I'm powerless to protect him, so I can only entrust him to you. Don't worry, this child's heart is filled with reverence for you, and he has no ill intentions. Hearing this, Meng Tianlang, who was kneeling on the ground, turned red. In Great Zhou, most people admired Zhou Xuanji, including him. There was no helping it, Zhou Xuanji was just too legendary. When someone is better than you, you may be jealous. But when he was far stronger than you, to the point where you couldn't even catch up to him, you could only revere and worship him. Let's go up the mountain. I have something to ask you. Zhou Xuanji said as he got up. Knowing that Meng Tianlang was the 10,000-year prince, the dissatisfaction he felt towards him disappeared. Well, the heavens were fair. As long as you were talented, you could open any door you wanted. If Meng Tianlang was properly trained, he might become a peerless talent like Yang Di in the future. He already had a blueprint in his mind. Meng Tianlang joined Skyfall just like that. Nightfall. Zhou Xuanji, Jiang Shui, Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Zongjian, Fenyu Dragon King, and the others all sat in a stone pavilion, while Meng Tianlang and Han Daozi sat across from Zhou Xuanji. So it's like that. 10,000-year princes also need to awaken. However, if they don't awaken, their fate will make it very difficult for them to die. No wonder they didn't die at Master's hands back then, Zhao Zongjian said as he stroked his chin, making Meng Tianlang feel quite awkward. Lin Chang'e crossed his arms and coldly harumphed as he said, I can't take disciples. So what if I'm a 10,000-year prince? I can only be a sword slave. Is my exquisite sword heart bad? Yes. Chapter 295. Lin Chang'e suggested that Meng Tianlang be a sword slave, and everyone agreed. Compared to Zhou Xuanji, this 10,000-year prince did not seem as powerful as the legends made him out to be. It's fine to be a sword slave. According to my understanding, the Sword Emperor personally supports sword slaves, and they are no different from disciples. The only difference is their status. Han Daozi stroked his beard and smiled. His gaze towards Zhou Xuanji contained a hint of curiosity. To be honest, he had always been amazed by Zhou Xuanji's talent. Before discovering Meng Tianlang, he had thought that Zhou Xuanji was the 10,000-year prince. Even if he wasn't, he should be a child of providence. Otherwise, how could he be so heaven-defying? I'm supposed to be a slave. I don't dare to dream of becoming a disciple. Meng Tianlang said seriously. Back then, he was defeated by Zhou Xuanji and promised to be Zhou Xuanji's slave. With his personality, how could he shamelessly become Zhou Xuanji's personal disciple? Zhou Xuanji nodded and said, from today onwards, you will stay at Skyfall. He looked at Han Daozi and asked, what about you? Are you willing to stay and become an elder of the sect? Han Daozi was a first tribulation itinerant immortal, and he had even given him a 10,000-year prince. He naturally had to rope him in. Hearing this, Han Daozi secretly glanced at Xian Xianghua and said with a smile, thank you, Sword Emperor, for your kindness. I have cultivated all my life, and I have ambitions. I want to do something for the human race. Recently, Sunlight Emperor wants to establish the Great Fate Empire, and I want to investigate it. I won't stay and waste the spiritual chi of the tea. Of course, when you establish your sect, I will definitely come. In the future, if the sect has any difficulties and needs my help, I will definitely not decline. With that, he stood up, bowed to everyone, turned around, and flew towards the horizon, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Chongming Demon Monarch muttered, "That sounds nice, but he didn't even leave a way to contact me. I won't even be able to find him for help in the future." Meng Tianlang's face was full of awkwardness and he did not know what to say. He also found it strange. Why was his ancestor in such a hurry? Daoya old man laughed and said, "It's all because of our sect master Xian. Back then, your demonic aura was overflowing, and you almost killed him." Everyone's gaze shifted to Xian Xianghua, who had a calm expression. Zhou Xuanji looked at Meng Tianlang and asked, "How's your talent in the way of the sword?" He was most proficient in sword Dao. The other spells could only be taught by Daoya old man. Meng Tianlang scratched his head. "It should be all right. Everyone in the Great Zhou barracks practices the sword, but they're not as powerful as pure sword cultivators." He did not use a sword, but it did not mean that he did not like it or that it was not suitable for him. It was just that the sword Dao had declined in the past. Ever since Zhou Xuanji rose to power, there were more and more sword cultivators in the various empires, especially in Great Zhou. Almost all the young cultivators practiced the sword. When Zhou Xuanji became number one in the world, he might usher in a golden age of the way of the sword. Have a good rest. I will personally teach you tomorrow and see if you are suitable for sword training. Zhou Xuanji nodded and asked Xiao Jinghong to bring him to where the second-generation disciples lived. It was also a good opportunity for this pair of gay friends to be alone. After the two left, Xian Xianghua clicked her tongue in wonder and said, "I didn't expect the 10,000-year prince to be someone else. However, it will take some time and effort to awaken him." Lin Chang'e said disdainfully, "What 10,000-year prince? In terms of swordsmanship, his talent is far below mine." The appearance of the 10,000-year prince made him feel an inexplicable sense of danger. Not only him, but Ning Zifeng also felt the same. Their previous guess was right. More and more geniuses would appear in the future, and their positions would be shaken. Zhou Xuanji shook his head and laughed. He did not mind their thoughts. "Oh, by the way, I plan to go out tomorrow. It might be a few years, or it might be decades before I come back. You are fully grown anyway, and you don't need my protection anymore. If you stay in Skyfall, you won't marry me. You have to wait until you marry Jiang Shui before you marry me." "It's such a waste of time," Xian Xianghua said as she stared at Zhou Xuanji. After living for so long, she finally fell in love with someone, but he had someone else in his heart. Just thinking about it made her angry. "Where are you going?" Zhou Xuanji asked. Xian Xianghua had mostly recovered from her injuries, but she was not fully recovered, so he was a little worried. To become more powerful, of course. Xian Xianghua left after saying this. Next, she sent a telepathic message to Zhou Xuanji and reminded him, "Don't forget to cultivate the celestial devil rebirth technique. It can save your life." Zhou Xuanji felt a warmth in his heart. This old demonic woman was quite cute sometimes. After that, the group dispersed to rest. Zhou Xuanji and Jiang Shui returned to the house. Jiang Shui poured tea for him as she asked, "Xuanji, do you think I have some kind of identity? When I awaken, I will soar into the sky." As she spoke, she became excited. It was as though she was a 10,000-year prince. Zhou Xuanji lay on the bed and snorted, "Yes. I didn't tell you. I already found out when you were very young." Jiang Shui opened her beautiful eyes wide and asked in surprise, "Really?" Zhou Xuanji flipped over and changed into a more comfortable position. "Yes. You are the woman of the future Sword Emperor. You are below one and above tens of thousands," he said with a solemn and sacred tone. Jiang Shui heard him and immediately pounced at him with bared fangs. "What? You want me to be below you?" To the right of one and above tens of thousands." The next morning, Zhou Xuanji got up and left the house. He asked the little black snake to call Meng Tianlang up. He took out the swine-culling sword and waited by the cliff. After a while, Meng Tianlang and the little black snake flew to the top of the mountain. Without a word, Zhou Xuanji activated Heavenly Lights, Ancestor Dragon Sword, and Emperor's Way Thousand Hands Sword Buddha. Meng Tianlang was fascinated by them. As expected, he decided to practice the sword. He first taught Meng Tianlang the 36 Paths Jade Shao Sword. This guy had a photographic memory. He memorized all the sword moves after seeing it once. However, it took him 2 hours to completely practice the 36 Paths Jade Shao Sword. The others left the house one after another. Daoya old man stared at Meng Tianlang and began to think about how to awaken this guy. In the next half a month, Meng Tianlang mastered 36 Paths Jade Shao Sword. Every move he made was like a swordsman who had cultivated for decades. This time, Xiao Jinghong, Zhao Congjian, Bei Xiao Wangjian, and the others could no longer sit still. They all began to practice the sword. Daoya old man came to a conclusion. This guy had already awakened. Without any warning. Ever since he started practicing the sword, his talent was fully displayed. Even his internalization of qi was much faster than before. Even he himself was confused. Before this, he did not believe that he was the 10,000-year prince. But now, he believed. And he was a little flustered. Because Ning Zifeng and Lin Chunga often found trouble with him. They claimed that they were sparring with each other, but they were actually beating him up. And so, he was struck down by Lin Chunga's scabbard again. Kid, you have improved again. Not bad. You are more powerful than all of us. Lin Chunga smiled with squinted eyes, which made Meng Tianlang gnash his teeth. Ning Zifeng also smiled mockingly. Before Meng Tianlang grew up, he must bully him, or else there would be no more chances in the future. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.